Thank you so much.
And Walter Olson, whose work can be found at overlawyer.com. He's senior fellow at the Cato Institute's Center for Constitutional Studies. Walter, a first for us to have someone from Cato on, so thank you very much.
Oh, well, thank you, Angie.
And you've been listening to In Deep Radio. Our weekly production is done under the aegis of Mix TV. You can send us feedback and suggestions via our website, indeepradio.com. Our executive producer is Gordon Whiting with help from Jill Fiddler. Our engineer is Matt Fiddler. Same last name. Our producer is Forrest Phillips. Yana Barkless is our acquisitions producer. You can follow us on Twitter at InDeepRadio. I'm at Angie_Coiro, C-O-I-R-O. Our theme is by Big Troubles. That's David Gans singing our closing theme. You can visit our site for web extras from Gotta Laugh and more this week. We'll see you next time around. Thanks for listening. I'm Angie Coiro.
But I know it's gonna get better. Yes, I know it's gonna get better, 'cause it almost always does. Can't say much about the who and how, but I believe it just because day by day our bonds unweave, mammon gloats as nature grieves. Oh, save us from these pious thieves. It's gonna get worse before it gets better. It's gonna get worse before it gets better. It's gonna get worse before it gets better, but I know it's gonna get.
I'm Angie Coiro with In Deep. I hope you can join us this week for the latest in a long line of conversations with important voices from across America and the world. We're a liberal program that understands we need to learn and to challenge our assumptions every day to make the changes we want to see in America. Books, history, movies, language, the internet, money, pets, food, the environment, everything that goes into life in America is fair game. No ideas are sacred and no puns are too bad. Join us here every week for In Deep.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
Raise up Madison, raise up 15! Raise up Madison, raise up 15!
Fast food and retail workers in more than 50 cities rose up in the biggest strike to ever hit the American fast food industry Thursday. Its demand for $15 an hour and the right to organize unions without employer retribution. In Madison, Wisconsin, there were several low-wage worker actions. Arby's striker Beijing Heo called on workers to rise up and fight, and he doesn't give a damn about what Arby's might do to him for striking.
What they need to do is start standing up for yourself and say, enough is enough. We're fighting back. Just because these corporates and these district managers, just because they got all the power and all the authority, they feel like they can boss us around. No, enough is enough. We're fighting back. I can care less what they do to me. I really do. Somebody needs to stand up to the corporates and the district managers and everybody that runs the food industry. You know what I'm saying? Enough is enough. McDonald's is making $5.5 billion off of profits last year. Arby's made $1.5 billion off of profits last year. So why is we getting all these low minimum wage jobs? We sit up in a poor neighborhood trying to survive. Enough is enough. We're tired. It's time to rise up, Wisconsin.
Courtney Dion Gardner was on strike at a Madison, Wisconsin McDonald's.
Right now today, what we living in, working for these people, we doing slave labor for slave wages. That's how I look at it. We need to rise up, 15 or better. This is unfair to me and my family for me to be working at minimum wage.
Amber Cutter works for a Dollar Tree store. This was her very first strike.
The reason I'm here today is because I'm a hard worker getting paid minimum wage. I cannot support my family off minimum wage. These people are making millions of dollars a day, and they're paying me $7.25 an hour. At this time, my family is currently homeless due to minimum wage. The more people that we have, the more they'll pay attention, because they can't run a business without us. It's us who runs the business, not them. They're just sitting on their butts collecting money while we're doing the hard work, getting $7.25 an hour.
Organizing is our right.
Cutter said she didn't know much about unions before getting involved in this day of strike action.
To be completely honest, no, I didn't. Definitely know I need to pay more attention because I didn't even know there was a strike going today until last week. And I've been talking about this for months, like how I feel like I'm being underpaid. And now all of a sudden there was an opportunity for the strike, so I took the opportunity.
Organizing is our right. Strike, 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 strike. Organizing is our right. Strike, 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 strike.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Packers.
Vikings.
We come from different places.
Uptown.
Downtown.
We come to different conclusions.
Half empty.
Half full.
But when we live united, we make a real difference in the building blocks of life. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly so do our communities. Real change won't happen without you.
Live united.
So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up today at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
My father was an early member of a group now known disparagingly as Ultra Lawn People. High, as everyone called him, was dedicated body and soul to the Sisyphean task of trying to maintain a lawn full of lush St. Augustine grass in hot, dry Texas. He planted, watered, fertilized, watered, mowed, watered, fought bugs and brown patch, watered, replanted, watered, ad nauseum. Some years he won. In other years, nature rolled him. High departed his lawn and this earth well before climate change turned Texas from merely hot and dry into scorched and parched. I know he would have denied it at first, but I think even he would have finally given in to today's new reality. In our drought-ravaged Southwest, the lush lawn is dead, literally and ethically. From Texas to Southern California, city after city is adapting to nature. They're policing neighborhoods to impose big fines on excessive lawn watering, paying homeowners and businesses to rip out grass and replace it with desertscapes, and even outlawing grass yards and new developments. And it's working. A pioneering 2003 turf removal rebate program in Las Vegas, for example, has now pulled 165 million feet of thirsty lawn grass out of the area, saved more than 9 billion gallons of water, and cut water use by a third, even as the population has mushroomed. This is Jim Hightower saying such an effort would have been treated as heresy only a decade ago, but now it's simply considered the right thing to do. This is not merely an environmental adjustment, but a fundamental ethical shift, especially among younger people. The idea that green lawns are exercises in ecological narcissism has taken root in this arid and politically conservative region, demonstrating that conservatism really can be about conserving.
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the greed heads of Wall Street and the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month for only $15 a year. Yes, 12 issues, only $15. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action.
Broadcasting from the We Act Radio studios in Washington, D.C., heard live across the nation, this is Take Action News with David Shuster.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
Hello and welcome to Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. Connect with me on Twitter and Facebook at Karl Frisch, and be sure to sign up for my email list at karlfrisch.com. We've got a great show for you this Labor Day weekend. Thanks for being here as we kick it off, and thanks for tuning in. We've got Peter Callahan and Rachel Calvert on controls, and I want to give a special shout out to our affiliate in Grand Rapids, Michigan, WPRR 1680 AM, 95.3 FM. Don't forget to connect with the show. Visit takeactionnews.com and be sure to follow us on Twitter and Facebook. Now let's get on with the news. Yesterday afternoon, Secretary of State John Kerry presented the Obama administration's case for military intervention in Syria, citing a chemical weapons attack on civilians that the United States has attributed to Syrian President Bashar al-Assad's regime. UN inspectors investigating a series of alleged chemical weapons attacks left Syria earlier today. They are set to brief UN Secretary General Ban Ki-moon later today. The attack is reported to have killed over 1,400 people. On Friday, Kerry described the human toll of the attack on opposition forces.
With our own eyes, we have seen the thousands of reports from 11 separate sites in the Damascus suburbs. All of them show and report victims with breathing difficulties, people twitching with spasms, coughing, rapid heartbeats, foaming at the mouth, unconsciousness, and death. And we know it was ordinary Syrian citizens who reported all of these horrors.
Kerry's speech came one day after Great Britain withheld its support for the campaign. Prime Minister David Cameron said he would honor Parliament's vote against military action. Germany has also decided against an attack. France has said it will take military action against Assad's regime, pending a parliamentary meeting scheduled for next Wednesday. Even absent strong Allied support, Pentagon officials say that the Navy has positioned 5 destroyers in eastern the Mediterranean Sea. On Friday, Kerry emphasized the importance of U.S. action.
And it matters deeply to the credibility and the future interests of the United States of America and our allies. It matters because a lot of other countries whose policies challenge these international norms are watching. They are watching. They want to see whether the United States and our friends mean what we say. It is directly related to our credibility and whether countries still believe the United States when it says something. They are watching to see if Syria can get away with it, because then maybe they too can put the world at greater risk.
The White House has said that the possible airstrikes are not aimed at regime change. Kerry mentioned that military action in Syria will bear no resemblance to Afghanistan, Iraq, or even Libya. Violence in Syria has already caused what the United Nations has called the worst refugee crisis since the Rwanda genocide in 1994. The UN estimates that 2 million refugees have left Syria since conflict began over 2 years ago. Anti-war protesters have gathered in cities across the world to call for peaceful solutions to the crisis in Syria. Later in the program, we'll be talking to Professor Marjorie Cohn, professor at the Thomas Jefferson School of Law, and in these Times reporter Cole Strangler about the administration's preparations for military intervention in Syria. In other news this week, several marriage equality victories following the Supreme Court's invalidation of key provisions in the Defense of Marriage Act last June. The Defense Department announced that it will extend benefits to same-sex spouses of military personnel and civilian employees as long as a valid marriage license is presented. The IRS announced all married same-sex couples will be regarded as such for federal tax purposes. Absolutely huge news, even if the state where they live does not recognize their marriage. In the private sector, Walmart, the nation's largest employer, announced that it will join the scores of U.S. companies that offer benefits to same-sex couples. Of Walmart's 1.3 million employees, including corporate and store employees, over half are enrolled in the company's health care plan. Walmart spokesman David Trover told Reuters, quote, "Since we operate in all 50 states, we thought it was important to develop a single definition for all Walmart associates in the U.S." Monday is Labor Day. This week, an unprecedented number of fast food workers went to strike in 60 cities. It is the largest mobilization of fast food workers in U.S. history. Later in the program, we will talk with the nation's John Nichols about the strike's implications for the labor movement. Stay tuned after this, and we'll talk to Tiger Beatdown's Flavia Zoden and City University of New York's Professor Angus Johnson about the Montana rape case that has protesters calling for a judge's resignation. We'll be back after this.
If you're planning to replace your Social Security card simply because you don't have it, you may not need to replace it at all. What's most important is that you remember your Social Security number. Remember during school how you memorized information and answers for tests? In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Sergeant Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Friends, David Shuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C.
Welcome back to Take Action News. On this Labor Day weekend, I am Karl Frisch. More about me at karlfrisch.com. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and Pinterest. Oh gosh, everything. MySpace. I probably still have a MySpace account up there somewhere. But this segment, I want to talk about a sad reality that we really live in this country when it comes to race and gender and the prosecution of crimes in this country. In 2008, Stacey Dean Rambold was charged with 3 felony counts of sexual intercourse without consent after his then 14-year-old student, Cherise Morales, told a church counselor she had been assaulted by her teacher. Cherise committed suicide in 2010 when the trial was still pending. Her mother later said the assault was a major contributing factor in her suicide. So sad. After her death, Rambold, the teacher, pleaded guilty to 1 count of rape. As part of his plea agreement, he was ordered to complete a sex offender treatment program. However, he was terminated from the program for missing meetings and other issues as well. On Monday, Yellowstone County Judge G. Todd Baugh sentenced Rambold to 15 years in prison, but commuted all but 31 days of that sentence. He gave Rambold credit for his 1 day served, bringing his total jail time to 30 days. During the sentencing, Judge Baugh said that after reviewing statements made by Morales before her death, he had concluded that she was, listen to this, quote, older than her chronological age and, quote, as much in control of the situation as her teacher. He later apologized to the Billings Gazette, saying, I don't know what I was trying to say. It was just stupid and wrong. However, he defended his 1-month sentence, explaining, quote, obviously a 14-year-old can't consent. He then added, I think that people have in mind that this was some violent, forcible, horrible rape. It was horrible enough as it was given her age, but it wasn't this forcible, beat-up rape. Sick. Absolutely sick. Joining me now to talk about this horrible story up there in Montana, we have SUNY professor and historian of student activism, Angus Johnson. More of their work at studentactivism.com. And Flavia Zoden, who blogs at redlightpolitics.com and Tiger Beatdown. Flavia, Angus, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having us.
Absolutely. So,
thank you for having us.
Absolutely. This story, the more you read into it, the sicker it gets. I mean, this judge, or rather this former teacher's attorney, talks about how appropriate this 30-day sentence is, because if you only knew how tough his life was now, he can't teach anymore. Bad things are written about him on the internet. Who do you think has it worse? This former teacher who is still alive, or this 14-year-old girl whose family has to live for the rest of their lives without the joy of seeing their little girl grow up? Flavia?
I find the sentence to be outrageous and a miscarriage of justice, and a very serious precedent as well in the way that justice defines or attempts to redefine what is rape. A 14-year-old child, because let's not fool ourselves, this is what she was, even though the judge wants us to believe that she was older than her chronological age, whatever that means, and that's a very serious precedent as well, claims that this was not rape, this was not forcible rape. And if you remember, during the Polanski days, when the discussions were when the U.S. attorney requested that Polanski is extradited from Switzerland, media and some justice experts were also talking about some distinction of forcible rape and non-forcible rape. And that is nonsense, because rape is rape. And a child
rape is rape unless you're somebody like Todd Akin or apparently this judge, right? Where we have to consider things like legitimate rape, forcible rape, what is rape. I think rape is pretty clear as to what rape is, right?
Absolutely. And I think that one of the things that this really shows us, this case, is how far the public understanding of these issues has
have come in the last few decades. I mean, what the judge said about this wasn't one of those beat up rapes. That was pretty much conventional wisdom 40 years ago, and it was a conventional wisdom which was grounded in an image of what sexuality was, which was based on the idea that male sexual predation was normal and ordinary and benign, and also based on an image that was grounded in an understanding of rape that was grounded in denying the experiences and the subjectivity of the people, predominantly women, who are the targets of rapists. We've moved past that, most of us, as a society, and this judge is still sort of stuck in the worst of the 1970s as far as this is concerned.
Well, I mean, have we moved beyond it? I feel like we're talking more and more about what the definition of something is that I thought was already established. Is it a sign of progress that these people are being called out for their crazy thoughts? Or is it a symptom of the times that we're still having this debate? Flavia?
I think that there's a pushback. Well, it goes in cycles. We're currently seeing another pushback trying to redefine what sexual abuse is and what rape is. And I don't want to overlook another charge that is being levied against this child that committed suicide, which she was older, which is usually levied at Latina women or women of color or African American women who maybe their bodies develop differently than, what is expected of white girls. So this is also being used to justify the sexual abuse and the lenient sentence. I think that's also very dangerous.
I think that's probably the sickest aspect of this story. And it's twofold, if you think about it. So you've got this horrible stereotype that has persisted for, decades, that people of color are somehow more prone to act out sexually. As an example, and I think it cuts across both genders, although I think women probably have it a lot worse. So, for example, when President Obama was first sworn in as president, there were a variety of instances where Fox News would put these photos up that looked like Obama might have been looking at the rear end of another woman, and they were clearly trying to hammer home the whole myth of the over-sexual black man, right? And in this case, you've got this white judge in a very conservative state basically saying that this Hispanic girl, it takes two to tango kind of thing. I mean, it's no different than saying she wanted it, look what she was wearing, except when you take into consideration that for, decades upon decades, there's been this persistent effort to somehow claim that women of color are over-sexual. They're somehow unhealthy sexually or more prone to promiscuity, right?
Angus here probably will have something to say about this, but there is a very deep and long historical precedent about this.
It absolutely is the case. It's repugnant. And a big part of what I was saying earlier about the fact that we moved beyond it is that one of the reasons why statutory rape laws were written the way that they were to preclude exactly that kind of argumentation inside a court of law. The whole idea, a very, very large part of the feminist organizing around the criminal justice system as it has to do with rape and sexual assault, is to say that these myths that people keep holding on to, the myth of, the young girl as the Jezebel, particularly young women of color who are seducing these men, the myth that, what you're wearing or your past sexual relationship with somebody is somehow excuses rape or sexual assault. A very large part of the feminist legal work that's done in the last few decades is to say, whether you believe this or not, it has no place in the courtroom. And the premise behind statutory rape laws is
Angus, hang on one second.
No matter what
Angus,
consent was said.
I think that's a perfectly fine argument to make, but it has no point, no place in our court. But what about when it's the judge that is bringing it to our court, like this case?
Exactly it. Now, what happened here was that because of this sort of bizarre chain of events, and specifically because of the fact that this guy's sexual assault, by all accounts, was a major contributing factor in the suicide of Sharice Morales. That put the judge in a position where he was able to exercise a kind of discretion, which the entire intent of statutory rape laws was to prevent him from being able to exert.
Well, and I just want to be clear with people. I mean, just to reiterate one more time, this guy pled and in exchange had basically a deferred sentence. If you don't do anything wrong, you won't go to jail for 15 years, yada, yada, yada. But if you do anything wrong, if you don't do your treatment program, if you don't stay away from sexual relationships and young people, then we can use your confession against you in court. And he didn't show up consistently for his treatment program. He had sexual relationships without notifying the folks that needed to be notified. And the judge basically looked at this guy, who had done nothing, by the way, to show remorse or to show that he was committed to doing the right thing. I mean, I'm not even talking about, the fallacy that the first sentence he received was justifiable. But he didn't show this judge any reason for leniency. He didn't do anything that the court had told him to do. And how many men and women of color have found themselves in a similar position and had the book thrown at them when they've gone awry of probation or when they've gone awry of some plea agreement and not been granted the leniency of having raped a young girl repeatedly and getting 30 days in jail. Sick.
Well, and we've seen something, the flip side of this, exactly the flip side that you're describing over and over again in cases where you have young people who are peers engaging in a sexual relationship.
Well, and Angus, that's something, that story's been coming up time and again of late. I want to dig into it. If you two, Flavia Zoden and Angus Johnson, could stick around and we'll pick up this conversation on the other side of this break.
You're listening to Take Action News on We Act Radio, produced at the studios of WPWC 1480 AM in Washington, D.C., your nation's capital.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away. And after a couple of weeks, I went to my doctor.
A sore, lump, or thick patch in your mouth or throat could be a symptom of oral cancer.
My doctor told me I was smart to come in. He said that oral cancer is more common in African American men than in any other group in the U.S. It turns out I did have oral cancer, but it was caught early and my treatment was successful. I'm glad I got it checked. That probably saved my life.
If you're an African American man, you need to know about oral cancer. Visit a doctor or dentist if you see changes in your mouth that don't go away after 2 weeks. It's important to get an oral cancer exam because if you do have cancer, the earlier it's caught, the better. A message from the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, National Institutes of Health.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won our fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
IRS.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
You know, this used to be a good neighborhood. Now it's a mess. You got all these polyps running around. Stick it in the apple.
Colon cancer almost always starts with the polyp. Get the polyp early and stop colon cancer before it even starts.
Where do you think you were running to, huh?
I didn't even see you guys there.
Get the test, get the polyp,
I want to talk to my lawyer!
get the cure.
I got a phone call!
CD is for everybody, not just for the few. Anyone can share VD with someone nice as you.
If you're curious or confused, get information or a pamphlet at most pharmacies or a health clinic. If you need help, see a doctor.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians, 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. If you're just joining us, we are discussing the case of Stacey Dean Rambold. He's the teacher who raped his 14-year-old student, Sharice Morales, and received 30 days in jail. Absolutely sick stuff up in the state of Montana. We're chatting with SUNY professor and historian of student activism, Angus Johnson. More about him at studentactivism.com. And Flavia Zoden, who blogs at redlightpolitics.com and Tiger Beatdown. Flavia, Angus, thanks for sticking around.
Sure.
So one of the questions I wanted to ask, what do you think the implications are for comments like the ones we heard from this judge? Angus?
Well, I think that the effect that it has is to normalize the behavior and the attitudes that he's describing, and that's really, really dangerous. Because clearly there's something very, very askew going on when people. We just saw this morning that in the Washington Post there was an op-ed published by a woman suggesting that. That what she describes as consensual relationships between teachers and underage students should not be dealt with in the criminal justice system. It's really disturbing to see this stuff kind of flooding out now.
Well, and we've seen quite a bit of it. My question, one of the questions I wanted to ask, and maybe Flavia can take this. So over the last year, we've seen, I would think, and I haven't counted it up or anything, but definitely an uptick in the coverage of the politics surrounding rape. And there shouldn't be any politics surrounding rape, let's be clear about that. But I think of the case in Steubenville, Ohio, where the young woman of color was raped and a community basically said it was her fault. And had it not been for the internet, the kids who did it to her probably wouldn't have been held accountable. And there have been cases just like that one popping up all over the place. And then you've got this case. You've got all the times that we've seen Republican politicians talk about forcible rape or legitimate rape. And we're having this big conversation now. Is it a good thing that we're having this conversation? Or is it a telling thing that we're having this conversation because it still needs to be had even in the year 2013? Flavia?
Well, another thing I've seen that we need to take into account is what you just said. And in addition, the current attacks that have been going on for 2-3 years on reproductive rights, and how a certain kind of politician is trying to redefine access to reproductive justice, redefine rape. And, during the second term Obama campaign, you heard a lot of talks about what constitutes rape and how women should or should not have access to reproductive justice after being raped. And if we know, because this is a fact, this is backed by statistics, that women of color have more difficulties because of socioeconomic factors to access reproductive justice, then what does this
And not
mean,
just reproductive justice, Flavia, but they also have more difficulty accessing their rights in court.
Correct. So we add all of these, and I know that some people feel a bit disquieted when I say this, but I see a systematic attack over the rights of women of color. And this doesn't happen on only one front.
Right.
This happens on several fronts. The redefinition of rape or presented women of color as sexually available Jezebels is one aspect. Health services is another. Access to support networks for, food and shelter and domestic violence, that's another front. And when we put all of these together, all I have to say is, why are women of color being systematically disenfranchised? Why are being dehumanized?
Well, what do you think Flavia, what do you think the answer to that question is? Why do you think, obviously, this is happening?
Well, I believe that, the current financial, socioeconomical system that we live depends on having a class of people that is subjugated in order to continue perpetrating certain inequalities. Certain class of people, certain women, certain people in general, need to be kept, to put it in simple terms, in their places. And this is not done through a single factor. This is not done only in one way. This is a sum of different strategies. And what happens with this child, we can take it as a representation of one of the ways in which this is being done.
It's sick. And part of this, I fear, and maybe this is something that is healthier. We're now having these conversations in the media, and just a few years ago, we were not having these conversations. One of the reasons that the issues of race and gender are so raw, I feel like, is because they get bottled up and we don't talk about them. But I feel like the last 2 or 3 years, we've finally been beginning to have this conversation. Do you want to comment on that, August?
I think that that's part of it, but I think that it's important to recognize that these conversations have been going on all the way through. It's just what kind of microphone has been put in front of
people. Well, that's what I mean. I mean, broadly speaking, the mainstream media has not been engaged in this dialogue.
I think that that's true to an extent, but I think that what's also happening, and I think Flavia is exactly right about this, is that as the attempts to impose very, very serious restrictions on both abortion and access to birth control, including Plan B and all of that, as those kinds of projects have ramped up, the question of rape has become one that is suddenly newly relevant to conservative social policy in terms of reproductive access. That if you recognize, if you have a situation in which everybody understands that the basic principles of Roe versus Wade are the rule of the law of the land, then the question of, well, what do you need to do about abortion in case of rape is not one that comes up. It's a direct result of very, very much increased aggressiveness in limiting access to abortion and reproductive freedom more generally. That is the reason why all of these politicians are being asked about.
Well, and I think that we need to keep that pressure going. Angus Johnson, And Flavia Zoden, I want to thank you for joining me for this conversation about the situation in Montana and the broader implications. This is Take Action News, and when we come back, we're going to talk about the fast food strike with John Nichols of The Nation. Stick around.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East. Go Red Wolves! Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
I had a sore in my mouth that just wouldn't go away.
Education beyond high school. A path to opportunity and success for our young people. And the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream. Because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. We are federal student aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentAid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, or you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
Welcome back to Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. More about me online at karlfrisch.com. You can also follow me on Twitter and Facebook at Karl Frisch. That's Karlfrisch. Thanks for joining us on this beginning of the Labor Day weekend holiday. For those of you at home who did not know what Labor Day is all about, it is not about Coors Light and beach chairs, although it may be a significant part of your weekend. Labor Day in the United States is a federal holiday that is observed on the first Monday in September that celebrates the economic and social contributions of workers. It was first nationally recognized in 1894 to placate unionists following the Pullman strike, which was a railroad strike nationwide in this country. With the decline in union membership, unfortunately, the holiday is generally viewed as a time for barbecues and the end of summer vacations, but I see it for what it was at its beginning, a celebration of the American worker. And joining me to talk about the biggest story going on with the American worker today is John Nichols of The Nation. He's a good friend of mine, and happy to have him on to talk about this enormous fast food strike that's occurring. John, thanks for joining us.
It's a pleasure to be on with you, but Carl, what do you have against beer and beach chairs?
I have nothing against beer and beach chairs.
I don't see a future for you in the media if you're trying to be serious about these issues.
If I have to be in a radio studio on a holiday weekend, we're going to talk about workers, gosh darn it.
All right.
So,
it's a pleasure.
Tell us what's happening. I mean, my good friend Tina Dupuis tipped me off that in New York City, McDonald's, for example, they are providing people with a great deal where buy one Big Mac, get the second one free. So they'll give away free food to celebrate Labor Day, but they won't treat their workers with dignity and respect. How's that for?
They're charging the right price for the food. But
yeah.
Look, here's the bottom line. The fast food industry in the United States makes immense amounts of money on immense amounts of volume. I mean, it's not like huge profit off every burger, per se. It is, you sell a lot of them. And in a calculus like that, the workers become the essential players. It's not the food, right? It's not that Coca-Cola flows real fast no matter what. But it's the workers who actually prepare the food, get it there, keep the place clean, keep it open, keep it functional. They're very much an essential part of this industry. And yet, they are treated as, very close to expendable. They're paid exceptionally low wages, full-time workers.
But John, we're talking about high school kids, right? They're just looking to afford the new Camaro.
I wish. Well, first off, you couldn't get the new Camaro on the pay that they get. But
well, you could steal one.
Well, I think that would be wrong. But this is the key thing. So they're earning way below poverty level,
right?
In places all over this country. Often no benefits whatsoever. Very few of the kind of classic protections you would want, and they're not kids. I mean, it wouldn't matter if they were kids. By the way,
right?
You get a summer job, you ought to, you ought to make enough money to go to college. That's not cheap anymore. But the people working in fast food restaurants increasingly are adults, and they are adults with children. This is a very important thing to understand. In a stalled-out economy, we've had a little bit of growth in the last few years, and there's, it's not as bad as it was when Bush was finishing off and running us into a deep recession. But the fact of the matter is, we do not have a high-growth economy at this point. We're not opening up new factories and lots of new warehouses all over the country. In many parts of the United States, far from New York City, factory towns, small towns out in the Midwest, there are very few jobs. And so there are folks who maybe have 2-3 kids looking around. They've looked through those want ads for a long time. They end up working at McDonald's or Wendy's or Burger King, and they're proud to do that. Carl, there are people who, I've talked to these folks, they will put in the fullest day and work as hard and do it as honorably.
They're proud to do this despite the poor shaming, and a term coined by my friend Tina, despite the poor shaming that they are subjected to. When we talk about these workers, all you hear from a lot of people in the media is if they don't like the jobs, they should go work somewhere else. They're lazy, and that's why they're in these jobs that they don't make money in, et cetera, et cetera. And yet they show up anyways.
No, they not only show up, they do a good job, and they work hard. And except I can emphasize one thing. they provide an essential underpinning for the rest of the economy, because these are folks who are there early in the morning to serve that coffee and, whatever else somebody might eat in the morning, late into the night. So they're actually feeding people, doing all sorts of other jobs. Beyond that, they're maintaining public health and public safety. There's so much. These people are a part of our national economy, and yet they simply are not brought into our economic life. And this is the important thing to understand. The jobs at McDonald's and Burger King and other restaurants in a lot of places in this country, and also in a lot of retail, are no longer entry-level jobs. They're not jobs that people pass through because, the Chrysler plant isn't open anymore. And so, as a result, an awful lot of these folks are trying to make do, really trying
Well, and a lot of these folks have educations. A lot of them have bachelor's degree.
Oh, yeah. Well, they went and they followed they lived, as Bill Clinton used to say, they played by the rules, they worked hard, but they couldn't get ahead. And they couldn't get ahead because, and this is where we link up all the realities of Labor Day, they couldn't get ahead because we're 20 years, Carl, now 20 years into a free trade regimen that promotes deindustrialization, that ships our good industrial jobs, good warehousing jobs, all sorts of other things overseas. And so in so much of this country, these fast food jobs are the jobs. Now, if these fast food restaurants didn't make enough money to stay open, if they paid workers a good wage, well, maybe you could make some kind of economic argument that it just wasn't possible. But that's not the case.
Right.
These are some of the most profitable companies in America, and yet many of them are still pressing hard-working moms and dads down to $7.25 an hour.
Well, and in some places it's quite worse. I mean, if you take it a step beyond fast food, I mean, my mother worked as a waitress for my entire life. And in much of the country, people that serve food are paid less than minimum wage under the guise that tips will get them there, even if they don't get them there.
Yeah, it's a terrible, terrible calculus. The fact of the matter is we have had this tradition. And one of the things that I did not like about it, I thought, by the way, first off, a lot of the coverage of the fast food strike was good. And I don't usually say that about our media.
Right.
But the fact of the matter is it got a lot of attention in the business press, at local TV stations, and it's because these were large demonstrations, hundreds and hundreds of people in many communities going out. So it got good coverage. But the one thing that was missing is sort of a calculus on how you begin to address some of these challenges. And the fact of the matter is, the best way to address it is with rapid increase in the minimum wage. And, we've had presidents of the United States who doubled the minimum wage. That is it's not some sort of radical concept. And we've had substantial hikes in it at different times in the past. We need that now.
Well, and we're not talking about that drastic of a big move. I mean, we're talking about maybe bringing it up just north of $10 an hour, right?
Right. There's the folks who are out were saying $15 an hour, and that's a very.
But that's how you compromise, right?
Right. Well, let me just say first off,
I don't think they don't deserve $15. I think they do deserve $15, but it's a good negotiating tactic if you know that the sweet spot is somewhere between 10 and 15 to go for that.
But let's begin with just the concept of the 15 and say that's a legitimate ask because that gets them, just above the poverty line if you're working full time, right? So that's why you ask for that. You don't ask for it because, I want pie in the sky. You're asking for, a full-time worker get above the poverty line.
Right.
But if our society isn't ready to say that we respect full-time work enough that you shouldn't be in poverty, at the very least, let's get enough of an increase in the minimum wage so that when adjusted for inflation, it's as high as it was when Dr. King went to Washington for the March on Washington. This is an important thing to understand. If our minimum wage had simply kept pace with inflation in this country from 1963 to today, it would be almost $10 an hour.
Right.
Instead, it's $7.25. So Congressman Miller from California, George Miller, has proposed a fair minimum wage act. It's not perfect, and he'll admit that. But what it would do is take you to around $10.10 an hour, and then it would peg the minimum wage to inflation. So once you got there, those workers would never fall back as we had inflation. And it also, for what you just brought up, which is very important, it has a whole new set of protections for people who live on tips. Raises them up to a higher proportion of the minimum wage, has more protection for people working in the restaurant industry. It's a really good bill. And the fact of the matter is, it ought to be discussed as not the end goal of all these demonstrations, but something that could practically be done next Wednesday.
Well, and in the short term, I hope. I don't see Congress doing much to help workers, but in the short term, it would be great to see states that have initiatives putting initiatives on the ballot to do that with the minimum wage in their own states. But then also just put this around the necks of the Republican leadership. Make them explain every day. You know, we can't make the chairman of McDonald's sit in a room and answer questions on our own. Members of Congress can. And if they won't do that, we should be asking the values proposition of the Republican leadership every single day. Why don't you think that McDonald's, which made, I don't know, what, $2 billion last year, $30 billion last year?
They did fine. They did fine.
Yeah, they did perfectly fine. Why won't they pay their workers a wage that they can afford to live off of?
Well, and Carl, that's exactly right. And here's one of the great challenges we have. And
don't tell me because you have to be competitive. You know, at a certain point, you have to ask yourself, what's more important, making investors on Wall Street happy with another increase in your already huge wins, or taking care of the people that are enabling you to get there?
Well, it's also, we actually have proof from a lot of these, in some of these low-wage areas, that restaurants and retailers that pay a higher wage actually are highly competitive. They do great. So this is really, the whole competitive argument is a fantasy that's been developed as a last excuse, or the argument that somehow this is going to harm job creation. This is not the case. These restaurants aren't going to close down just because they have to pay a decent wage. But here's a very important part of all this as well, because you're exactly right. Why don't we the people in communities across this country, states across this country, move to put the protections in, especially the minimum wage protections and general living wage protections? Well, there's a problem there. ALEC, the American Legislative
Right. They're doing everything they can to stop us from doing that. I wish we had more time to talk about it, John, but we're coming to the end of this hour. John Nicholas from The Nation, excellent as always. Follow his work at thenation.com and follow him at Nichols Uprising. This is Take Action News, and we'll be back after this.
Thank you.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM, broadcasting live from Martin Luther King Jr. Avenue in D.C.
My father was an early member of a group now known disparagingly as Ultra Lawn People. Hi, as everyone called him, was dedicated body and soul to the Sisyphean task of trying to maintain a lawn full of lush St. Augustine grass in hot, dry Texas. He planted, watered, fertilized, watered, mowed, watered, fought bugs and brown patch, watered, replanted, watered, ad nauseum. Some years he won. In other years, nature rolled him. High departed his lawn and this earth well before climate change turned Texas from merely hot and dry into scorched and parched. I know he would have denied it at first, but I think even he would have finally given in to today's new reality. In our drought-ravaged Southwest, the lush lawn is dead, literally and ethically. From Texas to Southern California, city after city is adapting to nature. They're policing neighborhoods to impose big fines on excessive lawn watering, paying homeowners and businesses to rip out grass and replace it with desertscapes, and even outlawing grass yards and new developments. And it's working. A pioneering 2003 turf removal rebate program in Las Vegas, for example, has now pulled 165 million feet of thirsty lawn grass out of the area, saved more than 9 billion gallons of water, and cut water use by a third, even as the population has mushroomed. This is Jim Hightower saying such an effort would have been treated as heresy only a decade ago, but now it's simply considered the right thing to do. This is not merely an environmental adjustment, but a fundamental ethical shift, especially among younger people. The idea that green lawns are exercises in ecological narcissism has taken root in this arid and politically conservative region, demonstrating that conservatism really can be about conserving.
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the greed heads of Wall Street and the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month for only $15 a year. Yes, 12 issues, only $15.
You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
Raise up Madison, raise up 15! Raise up Madison, raise up 15!
Fast food and retail workers in more than 50 cities rose up in the biggest strike to ever hit the American fast food industry Thursday. Its demand for $15 an hour and the right to organize unions without employer retribution. In Madison, Wisconsin, there were several low-wage worker actions. Arby's striker Beijing Hale called on workers to rise up and fight, and he doesn't give a damn about what Arby's might do to him for striking.
What they need to do is start standing up for yourself and say, enough is enough. We're fighting back. Just because these corporates and these district managers, just because they got all the power and all the authority, they feel like they can boss us around. No, enough is enough. We're fighting back. I can care less what they do to me. I really do. Somebody needs to stand up to the corporates and the district managers and everybody that runs the food industry. You know what I'm saying? Enough is enough. McDonald's is making $5.5 billion off of profits last year. Arby's made $1.5 billion off of profits last year. So why is we getting all these low minimum wage jobs? We sit up in a poor neighborhood trying to survive. Enough is enough. We're tired. It's time to rise up, Wisconsin.
Courtney Dion Gardner was on strike at a Madison, Wisconsin McDonald's.
Right now today, what we living in, working for these people, we doing slave labor for slave wages. That's how I look at it. We need to rise up, 15 or better. This is unfair to me and my family for me to be working at minimum wage.
Amber Cutter works for a Dollar Tree store. This was her very first strike.
The reason I'm here today is because I'm a hard worker getting paid minimum wage. I cannot support my family off minimum wage. These people are making millions of dollars a day, and they're paying me $7.25 an hour. At this time, my family is currently homeless due to minimum wage. The more people that we have, the more they'll pay attention, because they can't run a business without us. It's us who runs the business, not them. They're just sitting on their butts collecting money while we're doing the hard work getting $7.25 an hour. Organizing is our right.
Cutter said she didn't know much about unions before getting involved in this day of strike action.
To be completely honest, no, I didn't. Definitely know I need to pay more attention because I didn't even know there was a strike going today until last week. And I've been talking about this for months, like how I feel like I'm being underpaid. And now all of a sudden there was an opportunity for the strike, so I took the opportunity.
Organizing is our right. Strike, 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 strike. Organizing is our right. Strike, 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 strike.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Oh, drat these computers.
Have you people ever seen computers before?
I hear there's rumors on the internet.
I've used on the Google.
I gotta get on that internet. I'm late on everything.
A series of tubes.
They're so naughty and so complex.
Computers are my forte.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch all afternoon on this kickoff of the Labor Day holiday weekend. More about me at karlfrisch.com. You can follow me on Twitter and Facebook at Karl Frisch. That's KarlFrisch. Don't forget to connect with the show and let us know what you think. TakeActionNews.com. Follow us on Twitter and like us on Facebook. Speaking of Twitter and all things social media, this time every week we like to talk to Dr. Digipol, Alan Rosenblatt. Alan, are you there?
Here. How's it doing, Carl?
It's going pretty well. So, tell us about the backlash against Bill Clinton on Twitter for saying that he was speaking at the National Mall at the Lincoln Memorial in commemoration of the Dream speech, the March on Washington. He said that voting should be as easy as buying an assault weapon. So there was a backlash on Twitter. Tell us about it.
Well, there was. It just was a huge flare-up. Obviously the Second Amendment supporters, take that as the most sacrosanct of all rights. But I think if you really read what the framers were all about when they wrote the Constitution, that was a means to achieving your voting rights. That was a means to achieving your political rights. And I think the backlash sort of reveals the sense of.
I, for one, having gone to probably more gun shows than any progressive in the media today. My father is a gun guy. I got to tell you, I agree with originalism here. A strong supporter of the Second Amendment in its original concept, because they never knew that assault weapons would ever come. They never knew that the handguns of today would be here. So I have no problem with people having muskets that they have to load through the barrel with their own black powder. But certainly, I think the president's President Clinton's point stands about how difficult the right is trying to make it to vote in this country, and that's that's been a subject that has been evergreen on social media for a couple of years now, hasn't it?
Yeah. The Second Amendment's protectors are out in force. They coordinate very effectively, and that's really, I think, the big thing is that the voices on that side of the equation, in terms of the extreme positions of the NRA, don't represent a majority of even their own members.
Right.
They represent, there's a core group of people who are just so dedicated and so coordinated that they.
Well, it's the only issue that matters to them, and my father would be one of those people.
It's very interesting.
The only issue that matters is guns.
I always take the position that, the Second Amendment does talk about individual rights because the right of the people shall not be infringed is in the First Amendment, and there it talks about individuals. And so I see reasonable, but I think the more compelling argument is that it's not very intelligent to have a gun in most situations in this country.
Especially if you're not part of a well-regulated militia.
Right, or carrying a gun around into bars in Virginia, which they want you to be able to do, is just stupid.
I don't know if you heard this story about this. I think it was a Virginia state senator who wanted to arm all of our teachers. Did you hear about this? He accidentally shot a teacher with a rubber bullet this week.
That's a great, you get what you pay for. Kind of thing. Be careful what you ask for. The other thing that's going on social media, besides Clinton's flare-up in the midweek, has been the whole debate over whether or not we should take military action in Syria. And this has been interesting, I think, because, and you're going to be talking more about it in the rest of the show, but
right.
What I find very interesting is, while there isn't sort of a reply back and forth between and among members of Congress, there is a lot of virtual debate going on between the administration and coming out of the White House Twitter account and the members of Congress. And we're seeing both progressive members of Congress and conservative members of Congress saying the same thing, that we should consult with Congress first, that we shouldn't be jumping into this. It's interesting to see politics make strange bedfellows.
Right.
But I suspect that to some degree, the Republicans want this because they want to control it, and the progressives want this because they don't want war. So it may be two people on the same side for very different reasons. I did notice some interesting things, that if you look at the House, which doesn't have the war powers that are specified in the Congress, those reside in the Senate, they're demanding consultation. Their tweets are all about substance. We shouldn't do this. We need consultation. We have to think about this. And then when you look at the Senate side, there are a couple of people like Mike Lee that are coming out and saying, yes, we need to, the president needs to consult with us first. But most of the members of the Senate are posting, click here to read my statement on Syria. Click here to read my statement on Syria. They're not saying anything on Twitter. They're just linking to a statement elsewhere. And as far as best practices go, I think it's, it's not one of the better ones. And but it is really interesting to see who's lining up which way, and to see in essence, a debate in public by members of Congress about a very, very important real-time issue. And you can really use Twitter to get a really good sense of what people in Congress are thinking about this issue and who's on which side.
Well, and to that point, we're seeing reporters even this morning on this first day of the Labor Day weekend tweeting about the fact that members of the National Security Council have been arriving at the White House this morning. Of course, the White House and the NSC have not confirmed whether or not a meeting of the National Security Council is underway, even though members of the NSC have been showing up this morning. But we're seeing these reports out from reporters over Twitter as well.
And a reporter tweeted that the president was planning to talk with GOP senators later today, and Mitch McConnell's shop put that out, retweeted that as well, essentially seeming to confirm it. So there's definitely this is a great situation where, we always talk about how Twitter is sort of changing the way the news cycle works. It's always important to verify what you see on Twitter, but Twitter is just a great place to see what's happening as it's happening and get a very quick and real-time metric or, meter on what's happening out in the world. And in this case with Syria, things are really heating up.
All right, so let's fast forward. Okay, let's say that we go to war in Syria in whatever shape it takes. Now, Twitter didn't come around until 4 years after we went into Iraq. What do you think happens if the U.S. goes to some kind of military action in Syria? How do you think Twitter ends up handling the news? Do you think it just becomes like the overriding discussion point for the foreseeable future?
Well, there's one element of it, which is the debate, but another element of it is reports from the ground. After the Iranian elections, we were able to get real-time reports from what was happening in the crackdown in Iran after the election through Twitter. So much so that the White House recognized it, and Nico Pitney, who was off at Huffington Post at the time, who was monitoring what people were tweeting from out of Iran, and being able to figure out who was real and who was a government plant, was invited to join the White House briefing press room and ask questions that were coming in through Twitter of the president. So there was a level.
I remember well when I heard President Obama say, "Nico Pitney, Huffington Post."
Yes, we've all known.
I think everybody said Huffington Post just got called in a White House briefing room. Amazing.
Yep. Yeah, it was really interesting, and I just really like the fact that he was there to represent what was happening on Twitter. Now, since then, that trick of Nico was able to identify the fake government accounts based on the fact that they were created after the election, right?
Right.
Where now you're not going to be able to do that because odds are, the Syrian government set up their dummy accounts for disinformation in advance of all of this. So you have to be a little more sophisticated here, and again, go and confirm what you're hearing. But I think we're going to see if we end up going to war or going to do some military strikes in Syria, you're going to get real-time reaction. You're going to get photos. You're going to get videos coming out of the country itself, showing exactly what's happening. It's going to be really hard for the administration to create a spin that doesn't reflect reality. It's going to be so there's that. I think back to some of the old research that was done by John Mueller on the impact of war on public opinion and public support for war. And he was looking at the Korean War and earlier wars, and showed that as the number of casualties go up by factor of 10, each factor of 10, the casualties go up. The percentage of people that support the effort goes down by 10%.
Well, and I hopefully hopefully that doesn't factor in here and we don't lose any lives. Dr.
Right.
Digipol, Alan Rosenblatt, we're going to have to leave it there. Thank you very much for your report this week. As always, this is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch, and when we come back, we'll talk more about the situation in Syria as it's developing. Stick around.
Our children are exposed to violence every day, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder, and I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
100% success rate in modifying free consultations at 10%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-9950 or visit hud.gov/prevent-loan-scams.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/Guard Reserve to learn more, including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Friends, David Shuster here, and all of us at We Act Radio are so proud of our neighbors here in Southeast D.C., especially one of our partners, the Ark. The Ark is at 1901 Mississippi Avenue Southeast. It's the home to some of Washington's best, including the Washington Ballet, the Levine School of Music, Boys and Girls Club, and the Children's Health Project. All provide a number of programs and services within the very same facility. The Ark is also home to the Ark Theater, the only theater east of the river, which hosts a variety of dance, music, and theatrical shows each year. Almost everything you could want is at the Ark, so stop by and see them. The Ark, 1901 Mississippi Avenue in Southeast. For more information, visit the Ark's website, www.thearkdc.org, or call 202-889-5901. The Ark, part of Southeast D.C. We Act Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org. Or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
Welcome back to Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. As I said in the last segment, members of the National Security Council have been gathering at the White House, although the White House has not confirmed whether or not the NSC is meeting. to discuss Syria. The situation has been developing all week. We've gone from basically thinking that strikes of some kind were imminent to kind of being an open question at this point. One thing remains clear: there are opinions strong on both sides of the issue, and then even within those sides of the issue, there are opinions that are diverging. One of the people I read at truthout.org was Marjorie Cohn. She's a professor at the Thomas Jefferson School of Law, and she's got a decent piece up that kind of goes through the rationale and whether or not there is a case to be made for such strikes, given that it defies various parts of the UN Charter, and without some kind of a Security Council resolution, we've got no business getting in there. So I wanted to bring Marjorie on to chat about this. Marjorie Cohn, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, Carl.
So walk us through your piece here. I mean, I think everybody, if we can get verified confirmation that these people, upwards of 1,400 were killed or hurt by chemical weapons, it's obviously disgusting and horrible, sick even. But you're going to have varying opinions on both sides what the response to that is, right?
Well, that's true, Carl, and I just want to say that the weapons inspectors were ordered to leave Syria early, the way they were before Bush's attack on Iraq, in spite of the fact that they have not completed their work. And this reminds me, as I said, of the situation where the weapons inspectors were kicked out of Iraq so that Bush could invade Iraq. Hans Blix, who was the lead weapons inspector for the United Nations weapons inspection team, UNMOVIC, wrote a piece in The Guardian the other day, and he said that, of course, you need UN Security Council authorization in order for these strikes to be legal, even if Assad has used chemical weapons. And he said a very interesting thing, which I think...
And I want to delve into that point a bit, because... But before we move on, if you don't mind, because it tugs at me as a progressive, right? The idea that politics could be played by members of the Security Council while people are being killed by their own government, and that nobody could do anything to stop it except for trying to negotiate. It seems like such a tough position to be in. If you can't get folks on the Security Council to agree to go in militarily, that the only thing we'd be able to do is negotiate with a person or a government that is killing its own people with chemical weapons. It seems like such a tough, sticky wicket to be in.
But Carl, you don't save innocent lives by killing.
I'm not defending I'm articulating that it's a horrible position to be in.
Right.
I'm not saying that we should do it. I'm just saying.
Right.
How. Go ahead.
Let me just read this one quick quote from Hans Blix, who says, and I quote, "And what is the moral weight of the condemnation by nuclear weapons states of the use of gas as a serious war crime when they themselves will not accept a norm that would criminalize any first use of their own nuclear weapons?" I think he really hits it on the head. The United States, and I think it's Obama, he seems to be, other than his top advisors, quite isolated in this position. The hypocrisy in the United States saying, well, we're going to go and punish them. First of all, punishment is illegal. You can't go in and take military action for punishment, and I'll get to that in a minute. But if you look at the history of the United States and its use of Agent Orange in Vietnam, the most deadly chemical known to science, the dioxin chemical, which still poisons generations born with birth defects. The Foreign Policy, not a radical newspaper journal at all, recently revealed declassified CIA documents that show U.S. complicity in Saddam Hussein's use of chemical weapons during the Iran-Iraq War. And he says Foreign Policy says the United States applied a cold calculus 3 decades ago to Hussein's widespread use of chemical weapons against his enemy and his own people. The Reagan administration decided that it was better to let the attacks continue. Right. These are chemical attacks, if they might turn the tide of the war, and even if they were discovered, the CIA wagered that international outrage and condemnation would be muted. In Iraq and Afghanistan, The United States used cluster bombs, depleted uranium, white phosphorus gas. White phosphorus gas burns to the bone. Depleted uranium causes cancer. It's radiation that stays in the air and in the soil.
Marjorie, one thing that occurs to me as we kind of tick through these horrible things, and it's always struck me as odd that we hold chemical weapons as somehow worse than other kinds of weapons and destruction.
For example,
look at the scourge of the machete in parts of Africa, right, where hundreds of thousands of people have been killed, cultures have been decimated, and we would say that the machete is less damaging to a people than sarin gas.
Right.
And so, this whole red line has been crossed thing has seemed farcical to me. And I'm not somebody who is knee-jerk against all war, by the way. So, I just wanted to put that out there as we were going through these things that various countries have done. And I think what you're doing is a good job of illustrating this double standard, and maybe even a triple or quadruple standard at this point. But then taking it a step further is the farce that only a red line could be drawn in the sand with chemical weapons, as if all these other types of weapons that have been used in the destruction of people have not been any less damaging.
Absolutely, Carl. And when you look at Obama's use of drones, much more than during the Bush administration, basically executing people who are in an area with suspicious activity, doesn't even know the names of these people, with no arrest, no trial, no due process, just basically executing them in cold blood with drone attacks. And think about the terror that these kids feel with the drones whirring overhead, not knowing if they're going to hit their relatives, hit a funeral.
My thing that I always say about the drones is forget the terror that they feel. What are we actually doing? If we know that things like Guantanamo have probably created more terrorists than because of the rage against such an institution, what do you think the drones are doing? They're creating terrorists simply by the fact that they're killing innocent people. People look at that, they blame America, and then they go on killing. There's got to be a better way of solving these issues.
Right, and I'm putting together an anthology on drones as we speak, and one of the chapters is about blowback, that when the United States uses drones to kill people, even suspected militants, and then goes in and kills the rescuers, and then another drone attack kills the people at the funeral, that makes people hate us even more. That makes us more vulnerable to terrorism.
And before I let you go, people can visit your website, Marjorie Cohn, that's COHN.com, for your work and more about you. This is obviously something that we're going to have to be talking a lot more about, and we'll be talking about it more on Take Action News. Marjorie, thanks for joining me.
My pleasure, Carl.
All right, when we come back, we'll talk more about the subject with Cole Stangler from In These Times magazine. Stick around.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Get out there and do something.
If you're planning to replace your Social Security card simply because you don't have it, you may not need to replace it at all. What's most important is that you remember your Social Security number. Remember during school how you memorized information and answers for tests? In the same way, you should memorize your Social Security number. Knowing your number is important, but having the card may not be. If you really do need to get a replacement card to show to an employer, it's easy to apply for a new one. Find out how at www.socialsecurity.gov/SS number.
Say you want to go to college. Yay! A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East.
Go Red Wolves!
Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on health care while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Hello, my name is Jim Gray, and I am a judge of the Superior Court in California and a former federal prosecutor in Los Angeles. I would like to talk to you for a moment about marijuana. Did you know that since the federal government first banned marijuana in 1937, usage in this country has actually gone up by about 4,000%? Or did you know that in the Netherlands, where adults are allowed to possess small amounts of marijuana and buy it from government-regulated businesses, fewer adults and fewer teenagers smoke marijuana than here in our country? Or that an American is arrested on marijuana charges every 38 seconds? If you are wondering if any of this makes sense, you are not alone. To find out more, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thank you, and good luck to us all.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. More about me at karlfrisch.com. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook at Karl Frisch. We're talking about Syria. What exactly is going to happen in Congress? There seems to be little to no opposition on the substance of an attack on Syria. The bulk of the opposition has been against the administration's failure to consult Congress, even though the White House has briefed congressional members. It hasn't convened Congress to ask for authorization. There's a really great piece about this subject in these times. Staff writer Cole Stangler is here. Cole, thanks for joining me.
Thanks for having me on, Carl.
Alrighty, so walk us through this. I mean, you've basically got, there's a letter from all the Democrats, there's a letter from a lot of Republicans basically telling the White House, come to us first, right?
Right. I mean, you have two separate letters that are, I think, making essentially the same demand. One from Representative Ridgel, who's sort of a backbench Tea Party Republican, calling for consultation of Congress, which is sort of a more strongly worded letter than the other one, which is Barbara Lee, anti-war Democrat, which has about, I think, around 40, 50 signatures. Ridgel's letter has about 100, 150, around 150. It keeps evolving. But you have basically those two letters asking for consultation with Congress, making what is essentially a kind of basic procedural constitutional demand.
Well, and has there been, do we know of any kind of response? I mean, we were talking to Alan Rosenblatt about kind of the ongoing discussion on Twitter and in the social media space by members of Congress on the subject of Syria. Do we know if the administration has responded to these letters, or has Carney been asked about them?
I mean, so the administration, I think it's pretty clear, wants to pursue whatever it wants to pursue in Syria without congressional authorization. I think there's no question that the administration would prefer not to get congressional approval. So what they're saying right now is they're justifying it basically they're saying they're consulting Congress by convening some meetings. They had a briefing on Thursday night with the National Security Council and some top lawmakers. They've now provided Congress with a classified version of the intelligence report. And they're having a meeting today, I think, with some Senate Republicans and Senate Democrats. And so that's sort of the extent of the administration's consultation with Congress, which constitutionally, I think it's pretty clear it doesn't really suffice. But they're prepared basically to go it alone, as they said.
Well, I mean, how much of this do you think has to do with the way the Bush administration made this whole big road show about going into Iraq? I mean, obviously they're very different circumstances and very different. What seems like military objectives are wildly different than between the two cases. But we don't see anybody making the case in front of Congress, right? That would probably happen if the administration did seek permission. You'd have Secretary Kerry up there giving his presentation, etc. How much of this is like preemptive damage control?
I'm sorry, I'm not sure I'm following the question exactly.
Okay, well, so during the run-up to the war in Iraq, you had various efforts by the administration, the Bush administration, to convince the American people and anybody who would listen that going into Iraq was the right thing to do. It seems like in this case, much of that discussion, much of that convincing is happening behind closed doors. What do you make of that?
I mean, I think that's sort of been this administration's MO so far when it comes to foreign policy issues and when it comes to war issues. I mean, you look, for instance, at the intervention in Libya, and Libya, they didn't consult Congress at all whatsoever until then once it was clear that that they'd violated the administration violated the War Powers Resolution, which is a statute, says that you have to get congressional approval after 90 days. The administration justified it by saying that the involvement in Libya did not, I think the quote is, involve sustained fighting or active exchanges of fire with hostile forces. So basically saying that it didn't count as hostilities. And so I based on that precedent that they used for Libya, I think you might see something similar emerge with Syria, where they're saying that, the president has made it clear that this is going to be a very short-term, limited intervention. So if Libya did not count as, as actual hostilities, then I don't think Syria does either. If you want to take that logic out to its extreme. Another point which I tried to mention in the article, which I think is interesting, is we're talking about issues that Congress has on procedural questions about being wanting to be consulted, and so the criticism has so far been centered around that. You have about 200 members of Congress on the record saying that they want consultation in accordance with the Constitution, in accordance with the War Powers Act. On the other hand, you have a much more muted criticism of the actual intervention itself. And so, especially on the Democratic side, and I think if you're a progressive Democrat, I think you should be pretty ashamed so far of the response of Democrats in Congress. I think again, the situation is constantly evolving, but according to my counts, I think there's only about 4 or 5 members of Congress, Democrats, who've actually gone on the record and said that they're opposed to an intervention. And so I think that's an interesting story, the way that Democrats have basically, given the president the go-ahead to pursue the kind of policy he wants.
Well, and to that extent, so the only activity we've really seen from are there any Democrats, aside from saying we shouldn't be doing this, are there any Democrats who are getting close to that line but are obviously playing it more cautious?
Right. I mean, I was speaking with people and trying to understand why has this response been so muted so far. I think part of it has to do with the fact that Congress is on recess until September 9th. So it's hard to kind of keep up to speed is one reason. Other people, I think the principal reason is the reluctance to criticize a Democratic president. That's what Congressman Grayson told me, and I think people even. My impression is behind closed doors in private, people are, Democrats are concerned about this, but they're not willing to go public and go on the record. I think to be quite frank, I think it's pretty shameful that you only have about 5 Democrats who have said they're actually opposed to an intervention in Syria. You think about someone like Congresswoman Pelosi, who rose to prominence in large part because of her critiques of the Bush administration's war in Iraq, who actually now is pushing Obama to intervene in Syria. There are reports that on that conference call I was talking about on Thursday night with the National Security Council, Boehner and Pelosi, and other top lawmakers, that actually Pelosi was the one who was pushing an intervention, and that Boehner was actually much more reserved. So I think it's just interesting to see the way that the Democratic response to war has shifted so dramatically.
But is it really that shocking? I mean, Democrats on Obama's watch have accepted all sorts of things that they wouldn't have accepted, were a different administration, whether it's healthcare reform with no public option, whether it's no movement on climate change, or conservative approaches to just about every issue, which, of course, the right wing completely abandons. But there's been this great zeal to compromise by congressional Democrats the entirety of the Obama administration. Why would this be any different?
I can't disagree with you right there. I think on a whole number of issues you can point to that. But in particular, I think the evolution, put it gently, has been pretty drastic.
Are there any organizations out there that have already? I mean, I think of Move On in 2002. Move On certainly came to prominence in 2002 around the war. It had been around since the Monica Lewinsky scandal, but really came into its own around the run into the war in Iraq. Is there any institutional movement within the progressive world, organizationally, that have started beating the drums?
I mean, there are a number of groups here that have tried to rally opposition so far. I think even right now, when President Obama's giving a conference right now in the Rose Garden, you might even be able to hear the protests that were organized by Code Pink in front of the White House that are taking place right now.
I mean, any effective organizations.
Okay. Well, I mean, you have groups like Progressive Democrats of America that are trying to rally opposition, trying to organize meetings with members of Congress, and trying to get people on board. I think the institutional peace movement, anti-war movement, is pretty much non-existent. That's just a sad reality of it right now.
It's a sad reality indeed, and something that I think maybe this is the thing that wakes it up. We've been talking to Cole Stangler. He is with In These Times. You can find him at In These Times online. Cole, thanks for joining us.
Thanks so much for having me.
We'll be talking more about this issue in the coming weeks. I'm confident of that. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. All afternoon. Stick around. We'll be back with more of a great show.
Education beyond high school, a path to opportunity and success for our young people, and the key to building a better life for themselves and ultimately their own children. But for many, all this is only a dream, because the challenge of paying for education beyond high school seems to put this opportunity out of reach. But there is an organization that can help. Each year we award $80 billion in grants, low-interest loans, and work study to students in colleges, trade schools, and professional schools. We are federal student aid, part of the U.S. Department of Education. You can learn more by logging on to federalstudentAid.ed.gov. We may be able to help you realize your dreams, so don't get left behind. After all, the most costly education is the one not begun. Federal Student Aid. Start here, go further.
Jeff, I'm home.
Hey, Mom.
So, what did you do today? I noticed the dishes are still in the sink.
I've been busy.
Getting your taxes done like we talked about?
Oh, I got my friend Dave on that. Hey, he's only charging $20.
Not Dave from your high school class who graduated 3 years late.
Yeah, he's good with numbers. Won our fantasy football league last year.
Jeff, I can't believe you would actually take your...
Kidding, Mom. I took all my paperwork over to that preparer just like you recommended.
Using a paid tax preparer this year? Visit irs.gov for some do's and don'ts. Like look for a preparer who has a preparer tax ID number and signs your return. Check out their qualifications and review your tax return before you sign it.
Oh, Jeff, why do you do this to me?
Mom, you're just so easy.
irs.gov. It's the best tax tip of all.
Hello everyone, I'm Daniel Marins, and I'm here to talk to you about Take Action News with David Shuster. Every week we talk politics, government, and what you can do to take action. David Shuster talks with today's leading political minds.
Valerie, so many people will know your name, know your story because of those dastardly actions by the Bush administration to try to discredit your husband, who called them out for their lies that led up to the Iraq War. And in so going after him, they leaked your name. 10 years since the start of the Iraq War. Has your perspective on any of this changed? Do you still carry around any sort of anger or frustration to the Bush administration? How have you been dealing with it all these years?
Until the right is able to come to terms with the reality that we were lied into this war and it was not a good idea and it wasn't to liberate the Iraqi people, they will just continue to live in, la-la land and perpetuate the lies that got us into the war in the first place.
Tune in from noon to 3 p.m. every Saturday, right here on We Act Radio.
When our daughter Ava was 4, we noticed she didn't talk much. A genetic test revealed that she had hearing loss caused by 2 mutated genes. One she inherited from myself, the other from her dad. If it weren't for the amazing people at U of M, we might have never known the true cause of Ava's hearing loss or how to properly treat it.
The University of Michigan C.S. Mott Children's Hospital is one of only a handful of hospitals in the world researching genetic hearing loss in addition to treating it. Our breakthrough research and advanced treatments combined with outstanding care help us change children's lives in extraordinary ways. For the leaders who invest in pediatric care, call a Mott Patient Advisor at 877-475-MOTT or visit mottchildren.org.
She is more talkative now and more social. She loves music now. She's humming to the music, and it's sweet to actually hear her humming.
To learn more, call 877-475-MOTT.
They not only helped us find answers, they helped Ava find her voice.
That's the Michigan difference.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News 48 after. I'm Karl Frisch. More about me at karlfrisch.com. Follow me on Facebook and Twitter and Instagram and Pinterest and just around Washington, D.C. You can follow me around. I'm on every social media. And at this time of week, we like to spotlight an activist of the week. This week is no different. I am so happy to be joined today by Sophia Campos. She is the board chair of United We Dream, which you can find online at unitedwedream.org. United We Dream is the largest immigrant youth-led organization in the nation, a powerful nonpartisan network made up of 52 affiliate organizations in 25 states. They organize and advocate for the dignity and fair treatment of immigrant youth and families regardless of immigration status. Their current priority is to win citizenship for the entire undocumented community and end senseless deportation and abuses. You've probably read a lot of stories about these horrible detention facilities that they put undocumented immigrants in. So pleased to be chatting with Sophia Campos from United We Dream. Sophia, thanks for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
Absolutely. So, did I get that right about United We Dream? Did I, in a nutshell?
Yeah, great job.
I appreciate it. And obviously, you all had a fairly large contingent at the 50th anniversary of the March in Washington for Jobs and Freedom. You were scheduled to speak, but were not able to because of time considerations. They ran out of time. Who would have thought that politicians would be so long-winded? What would you have said if you had the opportunity to speak?
Well, I put actually the video of what I would have said online. So did Philip Agnew, who's the executive director of Dream Defenders from Florida, and Elena Eagleshield, who are we were going to be the three only young speakers that were on the program, and then we were all cut. And so I was very specific in my speech about the deportations that are happening, the tearing apart of our families and communities, and also the personal effect that it has on my family specifically. My mom can't see her mom die, right, because she wouldn't be able to come back and see her children. So that's the kind of moral dilemma that our families face every day, and we want to make sure that it's no longer kept invisible, right, that all of our communities understand what we're going through and all of our political leaders understand that this isn't just about legislation, this is about family, and this is about community and the safety of that family.
Well, and you mentioned it in those terms. It's quite broad, really, if you think about it. I mean, not only can people not freely travel to go see family members, et cetera, but if, God forbid, somebody in a family is the victim of a crime, a lot of the times these crimes don't go reported because they fear reporting such a crime will result in their detention as well.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. So it was mainly about, our dignity, and I was also very specific in calling out Obama to be more of a leader on this front. We had to fight for deferred action, which is a policy that he enacted last year to provide safety from deportations and work permits for some of us, including myself and my siblings. But we need to make sure to take it a step further, given that we have 400,000 deportation quotas every year, given that there are so many people jailed unjustly, both undocumented and documented in this country, that continue to feed the profit of so many corporations.
So what is United We Dream doing to help make sure that this happens?
So we're bringing to light all of this in terms of educating our communities or putting out resources. You might have heard that the SAFE Act is something that Congress is pushing for right now, which is a very big anti-immigrant legislation that would basically further criminalize our communities and enforce really senseless policies. So we're educating our communities, but more importantly, I think we're bringing to light the truth through actions of civil disobedience. Just a few weeks ago, two of our leaders literally blocked an ICE bus, an Immigration Customs Enforcement bus, in Arizona. This was led by the Arizona Dream Act Coalition, which is one of our affiliate organizations. So literally bringing attention to these things and putting a stop to them ourselves. This is nothing new. We've stopped our own deportations, and that's how we were able to win deferred action, is actually by doing things that the very immigration attorneys and political leaders, that are supposed to be protecting us, were not doing. So we came out and defended ourselves.
Well, and talk about that a little bit. I mean, once somebody is detained by ICE, they have these facilities that they keep undocumented immigrants in, and people have died in those facilities, right?
People are very abused in these facilities, and their dignity and their humanity is definitely not a priority.
Right, and there's obviously a lot of pressure on ICE to, I've read stories and I've seen news reports, I think on 60 Minutes, talking about some of the treatment that people have experienced there.
It's a jail. It's literally a jail. So.
Well, it can be worse than a jail too. I mean, we're talking a lot about the hunger striking prisoners in California. Those conditions might even be better than some of the conditions in these ICE facilities where they keep folks. I mean, people have been forgotten about in these facilities. No food, no water, absolutely cruel and inhumane treatment that you wouldn't treat anybody.
Right, and this is all kept under wraps. And like you said, because they're not labeled as jails, maybe they don't have to go through the same regulations. And the same thing for the courts. Immigration courts are very different from normal courts, right? So you see how this is all part of one system, and it's very interconnected. And I think that's why it was great also for us to come together with the Dream Defenders and really bring to light that youth are waking up and recognize that this is an intersectional, interracial problem, right? It's a systemic problem that we all have to face together. And I think that would have been something really powerful for everyone to hear, that I don't think a lot of other older folks, have tried to highlight and have actually fought for.
Well, hopefully in 50 years when we're having the 100th anniversary of the March on Washington and you all are in your 60s and 70s at the march, you'll be able to speak up when they try to cut the time of another young advocate.
We will definitely prioritize the youth.
One thing I wanted to get your take on, because this is something that occurs to me as we've had this discussion about a path to citizenship and whatnot. So Republicans, got their tails kicked in 2012. And for a couple weeks, we talked about, they're going to have to regroup and they're going to have to come to realize that there are going to be more people of color, more Hispanics. They have to do better with women. They have to do better on gay issues, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And then we come to debate immigration reform. And you have these people there are Republicans pushing for immigration reform, but they're willing to do anything to get other Republicans who are crazy people, literally crazy people, on board. I'm wondering, has it occurred to anybody in the advocate community that it might actually, the way that immigration reform, if and when it does happen in the short term, may end up hurting Republicans worse than if they just stayed the way they were. And what I mean by that is, so basically what's on display is a Republican Party whose version of immigration reform is to say, okay, yeah, we'll give you a path to citizenship, but here's what we want in exchange. We want a moat around the border filled with alligators who are electrocuted. We want a big fence with barbed wire on top. We want to make it criminal this way and that way. We want to make it really tough on everybody. Everybody has to speak the Queen's English, blah, 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 blah. Does it occur to Republicans that it might actually sound worse, the way that they're trying to get immigration reform enacted by putting all these strings that they're not actually good legislation, they're just vindictive, showing themselves to be vindictive pricks? Do you think it occurs to them that might be the case?
Well, it doesn't seem like it, does it? Because they keep putting, pieces of legislation that are very criminalizing and are, just obviously racist, to be honest. And I think that's why we also focus on community education. The thing is, I think a lot of our communities, the people that actually vote for these folks, don't have the time necessarily to be looking right at every detail, to be looking at every word on an act. So unfortunately, we have to work to survive, right? And especially those that are in the underground economy. That's literally what my parents have had to do in order to help us reach for higher education and other things. And that's what I've had to do. So it's
do you think this is their way of preserving that underground economy by putting all these strings and bells and whistles? I mean, it's one thing to say that we're going to give a path to citizenship, but there's going to be a fine and then a series of 5 or 6 things you have to do in order to qualify. It's one thing to do that. It's another thing to put all these other strings and attachments and bells and whistles attached to it. Do you think this is their attempt on behalf of corporate America to keep the underground economy working?
Well, there are a lot of
keep people in the shadows
coming out for actual legalization, right? They see the benefit of getting folks out of the shadows, but I think a lot of these folks are just trying to hang on to an old way of thinking, a very, very old way of thinking, very traditional, and it's just not the reality that we live in anymore.
It is not the reality. Sophia Campos with United We Dream. I want to thank you for joining us. Go to unitedwedream.org. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. In the next hour, we're going to talk about the Supreme Court's upcoming term, which begins in October, and some serious issues with the birth control device NuvaRing. You will not want to miss it, so stick around, and we'll be right back.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune into the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something. You're listening to WIN, Workers Independent News, a production of Diversified Media Enterprises. I'm Doug Cunningham.
Raise up Madison, raise up 15! Raise up Madison, raise up 15!
Fast food and retail workers in more than 50 cities rose up in the biggest strike to ever hit the American fast food industry Thursday. Its demand for $15 an hour and the right to organize unions without employer retribution. In Madison, Wisconsin, there were several low-wage worker actions. Arby's striker Beijing Heo called on workers to rise up and fight, and he doesn't give a damn about what Arby's might do to him for striking.
What they need to do is start standing up for yourself and say, enough is enough. We're fighting back. Just because these corporates and these district managers, just because they got all the power and all the authority, they feel like they can boss us around. No, enough is enough. We're fighting back. I can care less what they do to me. I really do. Somebody needs to stand up to the corporates and the district managers and everybody that runs the food industry. You know what I'm saying? Enough is enough. McDonald's is making $5.5 billion off of profits last year. Arby's made $1.5 billion off of profits last year. So why is we getting all these low minimum wage jobs? We sit up in a poor neighborhood trying to survive. Enough is enough. We're tired. It's time to rise up, Wisconsin.
Courtney Dion Gardner was on strike at a Madison, Wisconsin McDonald's.
Right now today, what we living in, working for these people, we doing slave labor for slave wages. That's how I look at it. We need to rise up, 15 or better. This is unfair to me and my family for me to be working at minimum wage.
Amber Cutter works for a Dollar Tree store. This was her very first strike.
The reason I'm here today is because I'm a hard worker getting paid minimum wage. I cannot support my family off minimum wage. These people are making millions of dollars a day, and they're paying me $7.25 an hour. At this time, my family is currently homeless due to minimum wage. The more people that we have, the more they'll pay attention, because they can't run a business without us. It's us who runs the business, not them. They're just sitting on their butts collecting money while we're doing the hard work getting $7.25 an hour.
Organizing is our right.
Cutter said she didn't know much about unions before getting involved in this day of strike action.
To be completely honest, no, I didn't. Definitely know I need to pay more attention, because I didn't even know there was a strike going today until last week. And I've been talking about this for months, like how I feel like I'm being underpaid, and now all of a sudden there was an opportunity for the strike, so I took the opportunity.
Organizing is our right. Strike. Organizing is our right. Strike.
You've been listening to WIN, Workers Independent News. For more information, visit laborradio.org.
Packers.
Vikings.
We come from different places.
Uptown. Downtown.
We come to different conclusions.
Half empty. Half full.
But when we live united, we make a real difference in the building blocks of life. Children succeed in school, families gain financial stability, the health of our neighbors improves, and suddenly so do our communities. Real change won't happen without you.
Live united.
So give, advocate, volunteer, live united. Sign up today at liveunited.org. Brought to you by United Way and the Ad Council.
My father was an early member of a group now known disparagingly as Ultra Lawn People. Hi, as everyone called him, was dedicated body and soul to the Sisyphean task of trying to maintain a lawn full of lush St. Augustine grass in hot, dry Texas. He planted, watered, fertilized, watered, mowed, watered, fought bugs and brown patch, watered, replanted, watered, ad nauseum. Some years he won. In other years, nature rolled him. High departed his lawn and this earth well before climate change turned Texas from merely hot and dry into scorched and parched. I know he would have denied it at first, but I think even he would have finally given in to today's new reality. In our drought-ravaged Southwest, the lush lawn is dead, literally and ethically. From Texas to Southern California, city after city is adapting to nature. They're policing neighborhoods to impose big fines on excessive lawn watering, paying homeowners and businesses to rip out grass and replace it with desertscapes, and even outlawing grass yards and new developments. And it's working. A pioneering 2003 turf removal rebate program in Las Vegas, for example, has now pulled 165 million feet of thirsty lawn grass out of the area, saved more than 9 billion gallons of water, and cut water use by a third, even as the population has mushroomed. This is Jim Hightower saying such an effort would have been treated as heresy only a decade ago, but now it's simply considered the right thing to do. This is not merely an environmental adjustment, but a fundamental ethical shift, especially among younger people. The idea that green lawns are exercises in ecological narcissism has taken root in this arid and politically conservative region, demonstrating that conservatism really can be about conserving.
If you like these feisty pops of populism that Hightower zings out on the airwaves, check out the Hightower Lowdown. Jim's monthly newsletter provides the in-depth lowdown on what the greed heads of Wall Street and the boneheads of Washington are doing to us behind the scenes. With Hightower's saucy Texas humor and truth-telling populist perspective, the lowdown literally can lift you up. And get this, you can have the lowdown delivered to your mailbox or email each month for only $15 a year. Yes, 12 issues, only $15. Check it out, hightowerlowdown.org.
American citizens everywhere are demanding and supporting speedy and complete action.
Broadcasting from the We Act Radio studios in Washington, D.C. Heard live across the nation, this is Take Action News with David Shuster.
Many of the world's great movements of thought and action have flowed from the work of a single man.
There is work to be done. The state of our economy calls for action, bold and swift, and we will act.
We will take action when action is required.
All right, welcome back. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. More about me online at karlfrisch.com. You can sign up for my email list. Follow me on Twitter and Facebook at Karl Frisch. Connect with me online. Don't forget to connect with the show. TakeActionNews.com. Follow us on Twitter and Facebook as well. This Labor Day weekend is off to a great start. And Labor Day to me means a couple things. It means the last vacation of the summer. It means the commemoration of the American worker. And it also means that we're about a month away before the Supreme Court begins its next term with arguments. Joining me now is the counsel of the Constitutional Accountability Center, Elizabeth Wydra. Thanks for joining me.
It's great to be here with you, Karl.
So, before we look ahead to this new term of the Supreme Court, let's look back a little bit. I mean, everybody knows about the big marriage equality cases and the ripple effect those are having all over the country. People know about the Voting Rights Act and how the Supreme Court just absolutely gutted it. The bigger story, I think, is kind of the thread that we've seen through term after term with the Roberts courts is just the corporate nature of the court. I think it was, 11 out of 13 cases last term, something like that, where the Chamber of Commerce had cases before the High Court, and they went along with the Chamber's position.
Yeah, I mean, corporations have had an extraordinary run of success in the Roberts Court. My organization, Constitutional Accountability Center, has looked at the trends of how corporations have fared in the various Supreme Courts, including conservative courts like the Rehnquist Court. And the Roberts Court is the most pro-corporate court of any of these.
And the Chamber of Commerce and groups like it are becoming even more involved with getting involved in these cases with amicus briefs and other ways, trying to get, putting attorneys on specific cases to try and get them through the district courts. So not only is this court more likely to agree with the Chamber's position, but the Chamber is putting its position in front of the court more and more often as well.
Exactly. And, this isn't just an accident.
This
was a well calculated campaign by Lewis Powell, who then became a Supreme Court justice himself. He wrote a letter to the Chamber of Commerce saying, look, if we want to get our policy preferences put into law, we need to not just think about Congress and elected representatives. We need to get our policy preferences in through the courts. And so he laid out this strategy of using the courts to win your policy preferences when you can't do it through the democratic process.
Well, and it's becoming clear that the right in this country is going to be using the courts more and more often because they're looking at the likelihood that they could be locked out of the White House unless some very serious things change. Congress is just not doing anything, which is fine by them if they can also control things through the courts.
Right.
Congress doesn't have to do anything if they can do it all through the courts. Right. So now we're faced with the idea that these cases don't necessarily get a lot of attention, but they're impacting real people nonetheless. I mean, you're basically talking about a Supreme Court making it harder and harder for employees who are wronged to take their employers to court, for people that are wronged by a product that they purchased or hurt by a product that they've purchased to take the manufacturer to court, making it harder for groups of people to file class action lawsuits. It's just one thing after another. It's not so much helping corporations as it is whittling away at the right of everyday American people to have their day in court.
Absolutely. The Roberts Court, the conservatives on the Roberts Court sort of take as their highest calling, pushing closed even more the courthouse door to everyday Americans. And it's, they might not be in the sexiest cases. It's not, a lot of these cases come under the doctrine of preemption or the doctrine of standing, which sound kind of like boring legal doctrines. But they're extremely important when you think about, class actions. Can people use their power to come together and try to, attack a company that's committed fraud? Well, if the fraud is only happening a few cents at a time, there's not going to be one individual who's probably going to go in and achieve. And Justice Ruth Ginsburg has been great at pointing out sort of the real world consequences in these cases that, can get sort of lost in legalese and allow the conservative majority to do things that I think if the American public knew about, they would be very concerned about.
Well, and that's a really good point, because I feel like, okay, I'm a gay guy. I was watching the Prop 8 case. I was watching the DOMA case. Those were very important to me. These cases, while not important to me, they're somebody else's Prop 8 case, right? Mm-hmm. I'm reminded of these cases, and I don't necessarily remember the exact specifics, but in the last court, there were a couple cases on discrimination in the workplace.
Right.
Where the court basically, in one of them, I think it was a race discrimination case, the court basically said, well, that person wasn't really your boss.
Yes.
So, sorry. It's
right.
like, okay, they're going to play on the definitional issue as opposed to letting somebody who is so obviously discriminated against based on their nation of origin and their race, some of these horrible, disgusting things that were said to this person, denied their day in court.
Right.
How would I feel if that was happening to me?
Absolutely. And Justice Ginsburg dissented in that case, very passionately and sort of with an understanding of what people go through who are discriminated in the workplace. And, you might remember I was so happy this happened. It was terrible, but at least the case got some attention, which it normally wouldn't because it's not that super high profile. But Justice Alito rolled his eyes while she was reading her dissent from the bench, which is, terribly disrespectful. But
well, I mean, it speaks to, I'll say this. I know that you may not share my opinion or that CAC, the Constitutional Accountability Center, may not share the opinion, but it speaks to perhaps the way that Justice Alito views women. This is a guy who voted the wrong way on a wage discrimination case that resulted in Congress having to pass the Lilly Ledbetter Act to protect women from being discriminated against and paid less than their male counterparts doing the exact same work. For anybody who wants to look it up online, they can go look at the number of women clerks Justice Alito has had.
Now you kick these cases to Congress,
what's
great.
Right.
Thankfully we got the Lilly Ledbetter Act, and I know Justice Ginsburg is extremely proud of, her dissent maybe causing Congress to get their act together and do something there. But, I think with all
very
these
rare that they do anything.
Exactly.
So when they throw the Voting Rights Act case basically back to Congress saying, you can do it, but figure out a different way of doing it, they knew what they were doing.
They know what they're doing. Yeah, they're across the street, but they, don't have their heads in the sand.
Right. They knew that by sending it back to Congress that it would languish. You connect the dots pretty clearly. It was during the oral arguments on the Voting Rights Act case that Justice Scalia said nobody in their right mind would vote against the Voting Rights Act because they'd be called a racist. Well, in essence, what the Supreme Court conservatives did was make it so that nobody would have to vote against or vote for the Voting Rights Act because they knew it would never come up again in Congress, and that they had basically taken Congress off the hook for having to approve something that hurt the conservative movement.
And they've tried to take themselves off the hook by saying, look, we're not saying necessarily, maybe we will later, we're not saying necessarily you can't have these protections in the Voting Rights Act. We're just sending it back to Congress so they can update the formula because, the country has changed, et cetera. So they can sort of, try to claim, we're not striking down the Voting Rights Act. We're just sending it back to Congress. And it's classic Chief Justice Roberts sort of trying to make it seem as if what they're doing is, very minimalist, when in fact it's a huge gutting of the Voting Rights Act.
Well, and, it's no less bizarre and disappointing because you think of how these acts came to be and how precedents when it comes to civil rights came to be. The law of the land was through painstaking, diligent incrementalism over a long, long, long period of time. And I just feel like Roberts is a very smart young man. He knows that he can't just wake up, take these cases and say, no more Voting Rights Act, no more affirmative action, and be done with it. He knows that if he were to do that, the reputation of the court would be damaged.
Right.
And for the next 30 years or 40 years, however long he's on that court, his reputation would be dead.
Right.
It just seems like he's doing incrementalism backwards to roll these things back because he knows it's kind of like cooking shellfish. You put them in the water and turn up the heat slowly to kill them.
I'm vegetarian, but you know.
Well, when steaming broccoli, you turn the heat up very slowly to keep the flavor. I don't know where that is going.
Yeah, but it is, you know, and I think actually we might see a little more pushback from the liberals on the court to that incrementalism because as Justice Ginsburg has sort of hinted at some of her comments over this summer, in the voting rights context, there was a case a couple years ago, Northwest Austin Municipal District Number 1, which is such an awesome case name.
Oh, people have that.
Of course,
tattoos, right? Yeah.
You know. There, the court found a way to avoid the question of whether the preclearance requirement of the Voting Rights Act was unconstitutional.
Preclearance, by the way, for people that don't know at home, means that if you wanted to change the rules, you had to get permission first.
Right. So, and then
because you had a history of doing things discriminatory.
Exactly, and that even in the last election stopped a lot of discriminatory voting rights ID laws, for example, voter ID laws from going through. Some racially problematic redistricting preclearance stopped as well. So it's very important. And in this case, a few years ago, you know, it seemed like the court had stepped back from the edge of the cliff on striking down the Voting Rights Act. And the liberals joined this opinion by Chief Justice Roberts that sort of said, oh, well, there's a problem with the formula. It needs to be updated, but we can avoid it by, this sort of like kind of technical way out. And then he used that against them this last term in the Shelby County case, which actually did gut this preclearance requirement. And Justice Ginsburg, I think, by her dissent in the affirmative action case in this last term, Fisher versus Texas, again, it was sort of like a middle way. We're not really going to strike down all affirmative action programs. We're going to send it back. And Ginsburg, I think this time was like, you know what? I'm not signing on to this, you know, what could be seen as like a great compromise victory for liberals with language that could come to bite us in the end.
And in the next court, there's another affirmative action case.
Yes,
so
there is, yeah.
When we come back after this break, I want to go into what's coming up on the Supreme Court's docket this term starting in October. This is Take Action News. We're talking to Elizabeth Weider from the Constitutional Accountability Center. Stick around.
Sergeant Michelle Garcia served meritoriously in Iraq and has the medals to prove it. Soon after leaving the Navy, Lieutenant Chris Scott found a job, a home, and started a family of his own. Corpsman Richard Stokely took the skills he learned in Vietnam and put them to good use as a paramedic. But soon after leaving the military, each of these veterans fell on hard times and faced homelessness. Even after Michelle lost all her savings, even after Chris wasn't able to pay his mortgage, and even after Richard battled alcoholism for years, they each reached out for help when they needed it most. A simple phone call put them in touch with a trained professional from the Department of Veterans Affairs. That call got Michelle a place to stay until she could afford one of her own, put Chris in touch with employment assistance, and found Richard a substance abuse program. These veterans are success stories not only for how they were able to help others while serving their country, but for how they were able to let others help them. If you know of or are a veteran in need, make the call.
When you go on a road trip, you're careful. You follow the signs to arrive at the right place. It's the same online. Read the internet signs along the way, or you may be led astray. For example, look for the .gov at the end of the web address. If it isn't .gov, it isn't the real Social Security website. People are often victimized by misleading advertisers who use terms like Social Security or Medicare to trick the public. These companies charge a fee for free Social Security services. These services include changing your name and getting a new Social Security card. There's no need to pay for services Social Security offers for free. Go to www.socialsecurity.gov. And remember, if it isn't .gov, it isn't Social Security.
Would you like to secure stable employment, affordable, high-quality child care, or an opportunity to serve your community through meaningful volunteer and internship experiences? If so, UPO is the place for you. Hello, I'm Andrea Thomas, Vice President of Administration and Chief of Staff for UPO. As the Community Action Agency for Washington, D.C., UPO has proudly served the residents of Washington for the past 50 years. Annually, we impact the lives of nearly 100,000 Washingtonians, 100,000 people advancing their education, securing employment, maintaining housing stability, and investing in their communities through volunteerism. Our vision is a Washington of thriving communities and self-sufficient residents. To learn more about our services and how you can partner with us or donate, visit us at www.upo.org. UPO, where we are uniting people with opportunities.
Take Action News is proud to be sponsored by Healthcare for America Now. HCAN is a national coalition of more than 1,000 groups in 50 states, representing 30 million people. HCAN works to promote, defend, implement, and improve the Affordable Care Act at both the state and federal levels. They also try to protect Medicare and Medicaid, increase corporate accountability, and confront forces that seek to take away critical services. HCAN believes in creating jobs, not cutting programs people depend on. HCAN runs comprehensive issue campaigns that mobilize people at the grassroots and define the public debate. HCAN is fighting to protect, implement, and improve the new health care law through national and state-based legislative and regulatory campaigns built on grassroots action, public education, communications, policy analysis, and groundbreaking research. HCAN has become a respected voice and national leader on healthcare while continuing to focus on aggressive field activity. Support HCAN, Healthcare for America Now.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. October brings a new Supreme Court term. I'm Karl Frisch, and I'm here chatting with Elizabeth Wydra from the Constitutional Accountability Center about what to expect in the next term. When we finished off the last segment, we were talking about how Supreme Court conservatives are slowly using incrementalism to march back the progress made during the civil rights struggles and successes of the 1950s and 60s. And there's another affirmative action case on tap for this coming Supreme Court term, which begins in October.
Yeah, so this case is, it's a little interesting. So in the last term, the court, we think, it's kind of ambiguous, said that universities still have some authority to use some form of race-conscious measures to promote equal opportunity in admissions. So some ability to use some sorts of affirmative action programs. But what's on the agenda for this coming term is in Michigan, there was a voter referendum that said that they would prohibit universities from using affirmative action in admissions. And so what the court will consider this term is slightly different from last term. So they'll be saying, is it unconstitutional for the voters to take away the university's right, the university's ability to use affirmative action to promote equal opportunity in admissions?
So it's certainly complicated.
Yes.
I'm sure that the wise justices Scalia and Thomas and Roberts will find a way to strip more people of their rights. Depressing, Debbie Downer, wah wah.
Wah, wah.
But there are some other big, high-profile cases. They're not household names yet, but I'm sure they will be. People know Citizens United.
Absolutely.
And it sounds like Part 2 is on the way. Tell us about the McCutcheon case.
Yeah, so McCutcheon versus the Federal Election Commission is an extremely important follow-up to Citizens United. And for people who care about the corrupting influence of money in politics, which should be everybody, except maybe Exxon or, the Koch brothers. So what McCutcheon, it's a case that was filed by the Republican National Committee and this conservative individual who likes to donate money to conservative candidates. They want to strike down the aggregate campaign contribution limits. So this is sort of the amount you can give in a 2-year cycle to candidates, political action committees.
Federally.
Federally.
Right.
Yes.
So you can give, now this is how antiquated my knowledge of numbers is, but when I was working in campaign fundraising, if I had $25,000, I could spread that around to candidates for federal office and the party federal committees and any federal PAC, but that's all I could spend. I know the number's much higher than that now.
Right, yeah.
But it stopped me from there. So basically what they're saying is that a rich person should be able to max out it's $2,000+ to each candidate, $5,000 plus to each federal PAC, and I believe the numbers are even higher for the party committees.
Right.
To every party committee, every federal PAC, every federal candidate. You're talking
Absolutely.
about basically making it so that they can spend. Let's say that do you know what the number is now?
I don't. I think it's
Let's say it's 50.
Yeah,
It may not be.
I think it's like 120.
All right.
You know.
So even if it's 120, you're basically saying you can go from spending $120,000 a year in federal elections to spending millions of dollars
Absolutely.
in federal elections.
Absolutely.
Because when you get into the minutia of how federal campaign finance works, so in theory, I could max out to candidate X who doesn't have a shot of winning, and candidate X can transfer that money legally to another committee,
Right.
which is a way of circumventing the limits.
Right.
So I could max out to a bunch of safe members of Congress and make it very clear to them, nod, nod, wink, wink, that I want that money going to these candidates that I've already maxed out to. So where do you think this case is going?
So it's a very important case, and one of the things that one of the many terrible things Citizens United did was to narrow in the court's decision what the sort of meaning of corruption is. And the reason that that's important is because it defines Congress's legitimate interest in regulating campaign finance reform, because their goal, of course, is limiting the corrupting influence of money in politics. And so Citizens United, instead of using a broader understanding of corruption to mean sort of like improper dependence on special interests or the appearance of corruption, they said, we're really talking about like quid pro quo bribery. And that's just absolutely not true. My organization filed a brief on behalf of Larry Lessig, who is fabulous. He's at Harvard right now, but he's been doing a lot of work since he was at Stanford on getting grassroots folks through his organization, Root Strikers, interested in stopping the corrupting influence of money in politics. And he did a study of every single mention of the word corruption by the founders when they were debating the Constitution. And they weren't talking about quid pro quo bribery. They were talking about a concern that our elected officials be dependent on the people alone and not sort of big money special interests. Of course, they wouldn't have thought about the money that we have today. But the idea is the same. And so if the court's conservatives who claim to be, in some way originalist or focused on the text and history of the Constitution want to be true to that, then they should uphold these aggregate limits that Congress thought would prevent money in politics.
Especially when you consider that Congress has the ability to make the rules governing its own election, which I think is an important point to make. It's in the Constitution.
Yeah.
Elizabeth Wydra, wish we could have gotten into more of the cases the court's going to see, but we'll have to have you back to do that. It's going to be another big year for the Supreme Court. Thank you so much for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch, and we'll be right back.
You're listening to We At Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
Breast health awareness is critical for all women, particularly African Americans, because we have an increased risk of dying from breast cancer compared to women of other backgrounds. At U of M, I'm doing research here and with women in Ghana to look for an inherited link that makes African and African American women susceptible to a more aggressive type of cancer. Finding this link, I believe, will make new treatments possible. But right now, making sure that you are properly screened is our best protection.
With experts like Dr. Lisa Newman, the University of Michigan Health System is a leader in cancer care. When you call our free Cancer Answer line at 800-865-1125, an oncology nurse will answer any questions you might have about the prevention, screening, and treatment of breast cancer and other forms of cancer. All calls are confidential. Call 800-865-1125 or visit uofmhealth.org/Cancer Answer line.
We're working to help everyone enjoy longer, healthier lives.
That's the Michigan difference.
As a National Guard or Reserve member, you served your country. Now let VA serve you.
I wouldn't be here today as a successful woman without the help that I received.
Your VA honors your service by providing a wide range of veterans benefits. From home loans to job training, VA benefits can help with some of life's toughest challenges.
What's important about VA benefits is they don't just touch you as an individual. They can touch your parents, maybe your grandparents, your child.
Go to benefits.va.gov/Guard Reserve to learn more, including how to apply online using e-benefits.
I just finished a master's degree recently, and now I'm working on another degree as well. So the military made that all possible. My veterans benefits made that all possible.
No matter what the time is, apply for your benefits. You earn them. VA is ready to help you.
Achieve your next mission. Learn about and apply for your VA benefits today.
Hey, I'm Anderson Cooper. As a parent, you want to make sure that your child knows how to deal with bullying when they see it happening. And chances are they want to help, but they don't really know how. Well, teach them that the best thing to do is calmly walk away, find a teacher or other adult, and speak up. And do your part. Be that adult they can talk to and trust will listen. Join me to help stop bullying. Go to stopbullying.gov to find out more.
The true definition of hero. And being a hero took a heroic effort.
Every day we bring to our fans the world of sports. We speak of heroes and heroism, but there are days when sports matter little and heroes matter more. These heroes don't hit walk-off homers or buzzer-beating threes. They simply made a plan for what to do when disaster strikes. You never know when you might need to be the hero, because you never know if today is the day before a natural disaster. Prepare, plan, be a hero. Visit ready.gov.
Hey there, Matthew Filipovich here, host of the creatively titled Matthew Filipovich Show, which, by the way, you can hear every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio. Now, I'm going to be honest with you people, I'm not the smartest guy in the world, but I like talking to smart people who are smarter than me, some of the smartest, funniest, most badass progressives out there. People like Glenn Greenwald, Naomi Klein, Cenk Uygur of the Young Turks, Jamie Kilstein, Allison Kilkenny, Alan Grayson, Jeremy Scahill, Jim Hightower, and more. That's right, I said more. Don't believe me? Well, tune in to the Matthew Filipovich Show every single Saturday from 8 a.m. to 10 a.m. for some of the best in liberal talk, news, comedy, and interviews right here on 1480 a.m. We Act Radio.
Welcome back. This is Take Action News. It is Labor Day weekend. Thanks for sticking around with us. We're now hearing reports that President Obama is going to seek congressional approval before anything happens in terms of strikes in Syria. We talked today to a reporter and an activist on the subject of Syria, and it's a big development. So be sure to watch that in the week ahead. We'll see what Congress does. I don't think the administration, if they want to go into Syria, throwing it to Congress is probably not the way that they're going to get approval. I don't see Congress acting anytime soon. But back to the show. Rachel Litsky Payne started using NuvaRing in 2008. She was a 20-year-old college student. The contraceptive device appealed to her because it was easy to use. Birth control pills have to be taken every day, but NuvaRing, which started being sold in 2001, is inserted into the vagina and removed each month, and it's just as effective at preventing pregnancy. One Monday in October of 2010, more than a year after she first began using a NuvaRing, Payne met with her father for a standing lunch date at Buffalo Wild Wings, and when they walked out of the restaurant, Payne suddenly became ill and began coughing up quarter-sized chunks of blood. They were resulting from a blood clot that had traveled to her lungs, which is often fatal. And that is the fate of far too many women who are prescribed NuvaRing by their doctors. Some women even die Joining me to talk about this case against NuvaRing, there are now more than 1,200 women suing Merck & Co., the manufacturer of the NuvaRing birth control device, because of these types of situations. Joining me now to chat about the subject is Ashley Britton Lander. She's an attorney with the law firm Schlichter, Bogard, and Denton. Ashley, thanks for joining me.
Hi, Carl. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. So, for people at home, I mean, I'm sure that a lot of women have seen advertisements for the NuvaRing product over the years. It's now made its way into stand-up comedy. I've heard comedians, stand-up comics who are women, making jokes about it. But it really is no joke, right? Tell us about the product itself and then about the problems that some of these women are facing when they use the product.
Of course, Carl. NuvaRing is a birth control product manufactured by Merck. It's not a pill, like you said, like most products available on the market today. Instead, NuvaRing is a vaginal ring that contains two types of hormones, a progestin and an estrogen, and these hormones are absorbed through the lining of the woman's vagina and into her bloodstream. Now, NuvaRing is marketed to women as being as safe as other birth control products. And many of our clients were healthy young women who decided to try out NuvaRing, which they understood to be the same as birth control pills, just only more convenient because then they wouldn't have to remember to take a pill every day.
Right.
But thousands of women have used NuvaRing and actually suffered severe and permanent injuries. And these are women of all ages. And the injuries that they've suffered are blood clots, which are life-threatening injuries that really changes a woman's health condition for the rest of her life. These can even be fatal, like you said. The types of blood clots involved in litigation are really those that can occur anywhere within the body, including the lungs and even the brain. And after a woman suffers a blood clot, this injury really causes a devastating change to her way of life. For example, she's unable to take any other combination hormonal contraceptives for the rest of her life.
Meaning, when you say combination hormonal contraceptive, what's another example of one of those?
That would be like basically any type of oral contraceptives out there that contain both a progestin and an estrogen. There are birth control products that are progestin only.
And we're not even talking about necessarily women who would need one to prevent a pregnancy. A lot of women take them to regulate their cycles and to live more comfortable lives. So they basically be relegated to being uncomfortable, a lot of these women, in addition to the medical problems that they have as a result of having used NuvaRing.
Exactly, Carl. It's terrible. And another thing is that because they've already had this blood clot, they're at an increased risk of having another blood clot in the future. And like you said, a lot of these women are in childbearing age. Maybe they're considering a pregnancy in the future. And if they do have a pregnancy, they're considered high-risk pregnancy, meaning that they'll have to take blood-thinning medications throughout the entire course of their pregnancy through injections that go directly into their abdomen up to twice a day. So it really takes away the joy of a pregnancy for a woman. And like I said, these injuries are fatal. So we have families grieving the loss of loved ones all across the country, mothers, daughters, sisters. So it really is a tragedy.
Well, and then I've also heard stories from young women who had started families but were, using NuvaRing as their birth control device or as their birth control to wait on having another kid, only to have these blood clots that end up leaving them with stroke-like symptoms for the, foreseeable future. One woman that I've talked to said that she struggled to even sit down and do homework with her third grade son because of the injuries that she sustained.
Right. These are a lot of the injuries, and probably what was involved in that was a blood clot in the brain that then led to a cerebral vascular accident or a stroke. And they do have, cognitive deficits that are lasting. They're long-term. I mean, they're terrible. There are really sad cases. I could go on to a long list of all the problems that these women suffer. It really is sad, and it really does affect their everyday life in terms of their interactions with their family, their children, their occupations. It really goes into every facet of their life.
Well, and those are for the women that are lucky enough to survive one of these incidents.
Exactly.
So let's take a step back and talk about why this might be happening. I mean, and whether or not Merck & Co. has done, its due diligence to warn people. So women are having these blood clots. Why do you think that that's happening as a result of using NuvaRing?
Sure. Well, really, it all comes down to the product labeling. I mean, this is what women and physicians are considering when deciding whether they want to use NuvaRing. And the bottom line is the NuvaRing label fails to adequately warn prescribing physicians and women alike that NuvaRing does have this increased risk of blood clots.
So they knew about that?
Sure, yes. I mean, we do have, even before NuvaRing was on the market, Carl, there were scientific studies showing that there was a near doubling of the risk of blood clots with hormonal contraceptives involving the same progestin as that in NuvaRing. There was also a participant in one of the company's own clinical trials that experienced a blood clot after only 8 days of using NuvaRing.
Well, and that's particularly unique because women that are involved in these clinical trials, they're not just any woman off the street, right? These are otherwise extremely healthy women.
Exactly. So it is a really unique occurrence to have had a participant who suffered a blood clot, and it's even more surprising that they didn't include this in the label to, really alert prescribing physicians and women of this blood clot that happened.
So some doctors sitting in their office and women are coming to them, to talk about what their options are for birth control or for regulating their cycle or for whatever reason that one would seek birth control. And the doctors are not being warned that NuvaRing as an option for birth control presents a nearly twice as likely occurrence of blood clots compared to other birth control devices. Does that basically leave it to the doctor to keep read up on the news of these types of lawsuits in order to effectively warn their patients? And if that's the case, is that how medicine should be practiced in this country? Or should the FDA be relying on science?
Right. And the doctors are relying on the information put out by the manufacturer. I mean, They go to their product label to really figure out whether this product should be prescribed for women. Another great example is there's a graph in the NuvaRing product label. And this is a key part of the product label that doctors really rely on in giving them information regarding the estrogen dosing of the product. And the graph depicts this low and steady state of estrogen being released into the woman's bloodstream throughout the course of the cycle. But in fact, there was another company, another clinical trial that was actually investigated by the company themselves. In that, half of the participants in this clinical trial experienced extreme bursts of estrogen while using NuvaRing, resulting in some of the NuvaRing users being delivered even over double the intended dose.
Well, and that's bizarre because it's supposed to release it consistently, right?
Right, exactly. The graph shows this, straight line that really depicts this low and steady state of estrogen being released. But in fact, it's its variability that was seen in the company's own clinical trial that really leads to a more likely scenario for blood clotting for these women. And like you said, the doctors wouldn't know this because they're looking at the graph. There's nowhere in the label is it mentioned that these participants in the company's own clinical trial experience these dangerous bursts of estrogen. That's just another facet that these doctors are left not knowing.
Positively frightening and sick. If you're just joining us, we're talking to Ashley Britton Landers. She's an attorney involved in this multi-district litigation against Merck & Co., the manufacturers of the birth control device NuvaRing. Ashley, would you mind sticking around? I want to get into a little bit about what's the latest on the case after this break. Would you mind sticking around?
Of course, Carl.
All right. This is Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. And when we come back, we'll dig a little bit deeper into the story, a story that every woman out there and the men who love women should be listening to. Stick around.
For me, guns are for hunting and protecting my family. I believe in the Second Amendment, and I'll fight to protect it. But with rights come responsibilities. That's why I support comprehensive background checks, so criminals and the dangerously mentally ill can't buy guns. That protects my rights and my family.
Tell Congress, don't protect criminals. Vote to protect gun rights and our families with comprehensive background checks. Demand action now.
Hello, everybody. I'm David Shuster, your host of Take Action News. On our show, we talk government, politics, and what you can do to have an impact. We're nonpartisan, report like hell, and let the chips fall where they may. We feature segments like social media, activists of the week, and the latest news affecting our communities. So join us every Saturday and make a difference. Yes, you and I, we can do this. That's Take Action News on the air, online, and at your podcast convenience on iTunes each week on the We Act Radio Network.
Say you want to go to college.
Yay!
A Big Ten college. But you don't want to feel like part of the, well, you know. Is there an answer for you? Of course. Indiana University East.
Go Red Wolves!
Indiana University East. You'll get the quality of a Big Ten education in a small college setting. IU East offers more than 50 fields of study, from accounting to political science, taught by internationally recognized faculty with an average of 18 students per class. So it's not, student number 95A-6273, please report to. It's more like, hey, John, welcome to class. Best of all, you'll graduate with one of the most respected degrees anywhere, a degree from IU. Don't wait. Go to iue.edu. or call 800-959-EAST to arrange a visit to Indiana University East. IU. Focused on you.
We Act Radio is a very proud partner of the Start at Westminster, a harm reduction, prevention, and awareness initiative sponsored by the Westminster Presbyterian Church right here in D.C. START stands for Syringe, Treatment, Advocacy, Resources, Training. These are the core elements of the harm reduction philosophy at START. The goal of this program is to reduce transmissions of HIV, hepatitis, and other bloodborne infectious diseases by empowering those at risk of infection with the tools, resources, and referrals they need to take charge of their health. Over the past year, the Start at Westminster tested over 1,600 people, and they're averaging about 150 tests each month. And of course, with the proper funding, that number could go even higher. For more information on this terrific program, go to www.startatwestminster.org. or visit the Westminster Presbyterian Church, 400 I Street Southwest, right here in Washington, D.C.
100% success rate in modifying free consultation at 10%.
Does this sound familiar? If you're in need of assistance with your mortgage, be careful where you turn for help. Loan modification scammers will offer deals too good to be true. Learn the signs so your life won't be turned upside down. Know it, avoid it, report it. For more information or to report a scam, call 1-888-995-HOPE or visit HUD.gov/prevent-loan-scams.
Our children are exposed to violence every day, in their neighborhoods, in their schools, even in their own homes. Exposure to violence can have a devastating and lifelong impact. Through community action and leadership at the national level, we're identifying the children who need our help. I'm Attorney General Eric Holder, and I'm asking those of you who have a role in a child's life to take action. Through your attention and early intervention, we can help children in need to heal, to thrive. Together, we can change their lives and their futures.
Join the Justice Department in defending childhood.
Action News 49 after closing out the show. We are talking to Ashley Britton Lander. She's an attorney in this big case against Merck & Co. over the product NuvaRing, the birth control device that has caused so many medical problems with so many women, more than 1,200 in this case alone. Ashley, thanks for sticking around.
Thanks, no problem.
All right, so this is a case long time in the making. NuvaRing has never updated its product packaging despite all of these problems. And by the way, people can dig around online. I mean, there's a lot here that has left unmentioned in terms of studies and reports that have found this product even worse than we've possibly described it here. So the case looks like it's finally going to trial in January. Merck has tried to get the case thrown out. They've failed. Where are things as we talk right now?
Well, like you said, Carl, there are nearly 1,300 cases on file in federal court and pending in the multi-district litigation. These number of cases, they continue to grow. Since NuvaRing is still in the market and still being used by women today for birth control, women continue to suffer these serious and life-altering blood clot injuries as a result. So new NuvaRing cases continue to be filed on behalf of injured women really daily.
Well, I've had friends who have mentioned that they have NuvaRing or are on NuvaRing, and I'm like, no, let me send you these news stories that you need to read, because I don't want them having these the stories that are out there about the women who have been irreparably harmed, the parents of women who have lost their daughters over this, just horrible, horrible stories.
Right.
And finally, they're getting their day in court in January, it looks like. Before we left, we were the last segment. We were talking a bit about the issue with the product label, and not just the label inside that showed the delivery of the hormones and how it was not in reality what was happening, and that these women are getting spikes of estrogen, for example, instead of a consistent release of the estrogen. I mean, the whole point of this product was to make it so that just like taking the pill every day, you were getting a consistent amount of these hormones to prevent pregnancy, to prevent ovulation, each day, every day while you're using it. And if that's not happening, at a certain point, one has to ask, is it not just a labeling issue, but is it a manufacturing issue as well?
They do have that. I mean, that does pose the question. We know that there are different, basically what we're arguing is that NuvaRing's effectively designed because of the use of the third generation progestin, desogestrel, and also just the delivery system itself with the spikes of estrogen.
Well,
so
and about the third generation progesterone, so the pill, for example, uses a second generation progesterone. Is that right?
There are different types. The pills have, first generation, second generation, third generation, and fourth generation.
But we know from studies that third generation versus second generation likely up to 2 times more likely that a woman could have a blood clot, right?
Exactly. Yes.
Why would a company continue to use a third generation progesterone if that's the case?
Well, there are a multitude of reasons, and that's really what we're asking in this litigation. There are documents indicating that the company that manufactured NuvaRing held a patent for desogestrel, which is the metabolite of etonogestrel used in NuvaRing, so that could be one of the reasons. Other than that, we're really not sure. In really, when considering the fact that the scientific literature did support that there was this 2 times increased risk of suffering blood clots with the use of a third generation progestin, so that really begs the question.
All right, I'm going to try and encapsulate the entire story here as it relates to NuvaRing, and you tell me how well I do of putting it into a nutshell. Okay. So NuvaRing is a product. It's a birth control device that is inserted into the vagina, and it's supposed to keep you from having to take other forms of birth control for 3-4 weeks. And the way that it delivers the hormones that birth control delivers, along with the types of hormones that it's delivering, has resulted in women having an much higher increased chance of blood clots. These blood clots can occur in a variety of different ways and travel to the, potentially to the brain, the heart, the lungs, and be deadly. But they can also cause all kinds of other medical problems that are, staying with women for the rest of their lives. Not to mention the issues that it has with women who would like to start a family, etc. And now we're talking about literally almost 1,300 women who are involved in this case.
Yes.
So how is that for a nutshell?
That was pretty good. That's a lot of information.
Well, and it gets technical. But at its base level, all the technical stuff aside, women should be able to take birth control without worrying about some bizarre medical situation that could have been prevented.
Right, and that's the fact with this product is that women across the country have been permanently injured, and unfortunately, some have even lost their lives as a result of using this product. So
I guarantee, if condoms caused some freak medical condition in men, that there would be hell to pay. Corporate America would crumble if men were outraged because condoms were causing some kind of a big issue or big medical issue. But it's another form of birth control that women rely on. And so corporate America is sitting here standing in the way of getting answers. And, and finally, these women are going to have their day in court. What does Merck say when confronted with this mountain of evidence that its product is causing so much harm?
I mean, really, they go the exact opposite way, and they say, the label's clear. It says that there is this risk, and women accept that risk when they, agree to take the product. And we're just on the exact opposite end of the spectrum in that regard.
Well, and, my understanding is that Organon, which, is owned by Merck, had originally tried to keep a warning about the increased chance of a blood clot from being included at the FDA's urging. And so it's not like they didn't know that perhaps they could be warning people about this, right?
Right, and that goes back to what I mentioned earlier with the one participant from the clinical trial experiencing that DVT after using NuvaRing for only 8 days. There was a recommendation for a VT warning statement to be included in the NuvaRing label, but basically that didn't happen. The company didn't want that. So it doesn't appear in the label even today. And like you said, there's still never been a revision to the blood clot risk portion of the label.
It's absolutely sad. It's sickening. I encourage women out there, if you're using NuvaRing, I'm not a doctor, so I would talk to my doctor about it. I would definitely do my due diligence and read some of the reporting that's been done about this horrible, horrible product. You should know what I mean when I say about this product being horrible. I have a clear opinion on it. And you should certainly follow this lawsuit as it works its way through the courts. Ashley Britton Landers, do you have anything else you want to add before we let you go?
Not really, Carl. I mean, I think you got all the information out there and your summary was good. My hope really is that these injured women and grieving families receive their justice and we're ready to go to trial in January.
Well, when I think about the legal system, this is a good example of attorneys doing right by their clients to get their day in court. And Ashley Britton Landers is an attorney with Schlichter, Bogard, and Denton. Thanks for joining us, Ashley.
Thank you for having me, Carl.
Alrighty. So, yeah, you should go out there and Google some of this stuff if you haven't followed too closely before you make a decision on using NuvaRing. I would not use it if I were you. But I wanted to get some time in here before we end the show for an important news update. President Obama said Saturday he had decided to take military action against Syria in response to the use of chemical weapons, but that he will seek congressional mandate for the action that could come tomorrow, next week, or a month from now. He said this at a statement during a Rose Garden presser. So it's something that we'll want to watch for the rest of the week. My thanks to Rachel and Pete in controls. This has been Take Action News. I'm Karl Frisch. More about me at karlfrisch.com, and we'll be back next week.
I'm Gary Johnson, former governor of New Mexico. Last year, my state became the 12th state to allow medical use of marijuana by patients who are seriously ill. Some people were surprised that a Republican governor supports medical marijuana, but I'm hardly alone. Groups like the American College of Physicians, American Nurses Association, and American Public Health Association have all acknowledged the medical value of marijuana. New research about medical marijuana is coming out almost every day, showing remarkable potential in all sorts of serious conditions, including cancer, AIDS, and chronic pain. But some in government still want to put politics and ideology ahead of public health. To learn more about medical marijuana and what you can do to help, contact the Marijuana Policy Project at 1-877-JOIN-MPP or visit them on the web at mpp.org. Thanks.
You're listening to We Act Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.
You're listening to We At Radio, WPWC 1480 AM. Now get out there and do something.